Alireza Firouzja of Team Falcons, the reigning club champions, going up against Team Liquid's Magnus Carlsen. This is what everybody wanted to see, and it's going to be an absolutely incredible final.
This is the moment we've all been waiting for. After the El Clasico in the semis, we get the king versus the prince right here fighting for the crown at the Esports World Cup. This match has us all at the edge of our seats.
I cannot wait. Yesterday's semi-final, Hikaru Nakamura against Magnus Carlsen, was electric. That was the appetizer only. And today, yet again, it is Liquid versus Falcons. Alireza has been flawless this event so far, unbeaten in any single game. He's coasted through, getting better day on day, moving up through the gears. Magnus, it was close getting through that Armageddon against Hikaru. He knows he needs to bring his A game, the GOAT, if he's to maintain his spot at the top of World Chess.
Alireza Firouzja has not dropped a game so far in the Esports World Cup. Magnus Carlsen, the only games he's dropped were against Alireza's teammate Hikaru Nakamura. And now we move on to the grand final. Even though Firouzja is currently unbeaten, I mean, he's facing off against Magnus. We must surely see his first defeat at some point during the finals, right?
Magnus, a favorite? But you know, if you have to beat the GOAT, you have to play like a butcher. And that's what Alireza Firouzja has been doing in the entire Esports World Cup so far. Undefeated in the tournament. The run that he has had absolutely fantastic. The way he took down Arjun Aragaisi, just the confidence with which he plays, the speed that he brings on. Magnus said it best. To take Alireza down, he'll have to be fast, he'll have to be good.
And also, there's a wider question as well. Firouzja representing some of the brightest young talent in the chess world. How much longer is Magnus Carlsen going to sit on the throne? Today might provide us some of those answers.
And the start to this match will be so important. Whoever gets the first win will recce themselves, will assume that they are the favorites. Magnus starts with the white pieces in set one of this final. He employs the Catalan opening, something he's been doing for a long, long time now, many years. This is his pet line.
Now, we should explain the scoring system is going to be slightly different in the grand final. For those of you in the audience and watching at home, we have the grand final as a best of 3 sets. So, set 1 is going to be a best of 4, like you have seen, for example, in the quarterfinals of this tournament. Whoever wins that goes a set up. They then have to get 2 sets to win. If it's tied 1 set all, we go to a third deciding set, and that's going to be a best of 2. Any set can still be decided by Armageddon.
You know, the first surprise of the match for me has already been done. It was on stage when Magnus was talking, an admission by him that he's nervous for this match. And that's not usual at all. Even if Magnus is feeling the tension or the nerves, I've never heard him say that right before an encounter.
Me neither. It's a historic moment on the board, off the board. Magnus' nerves did almost hinder him against Hikaru Nakamura, but he's hoping to shake them off. If Magnus strikes first, he is so hard to catch. Hikaru, one of the few who has the ability to strike back. I think Alireza, he will want to be at least holding this first game with the black pieces as we see the first big decision. The Queen's Gambit, the Catalan opening is a branch of that, has been accepted. Magnus trying to go pawn hunting with his queen to restore the balance.
E5, D5 being played now. We've seen a similar position with lots of tension in the center. We now have the pawns being pushed next to each other. Still a very similar position to one we've seen many times in the Esports World Cup, but we're going to start seeing some subtleties now, some nuanced differences.
And this is the first moment in the game. Alireza goes into a think. There are options with the knight. Where do you run to? 3 squares that I've seen play on in the board. You could move it forward to d4, b4, or retreat to e7, trying to get the knight to the other side of the board. And the one chosen by Alireza, an aggressive one, getting the knight to b4, disconnecting the white queen, saying, you know what? You'll still have to sweat to recapture that pawn.
A very ambitious opening play from Alireza Firouzja, met by equally ambitious play by Magnus Carlsen. This is a deflection tactic. The black dart-squared bishop caught in 2 minds now. It can take the white knight that's just jumped and captured on e5, but it would come at the cost of black's knight on the b4 square. We see that one is a bit loose right now, and Magnus forcing Alireza to think for the first real time in this game.
If we get an early time advantage on the clock in game number 1 of set 1, that's going to be fantastic.
And what a move. It's tactics galore, double exclamation mark landing. The Black Knight might have been doomed anyway. He was trying to throw it away for the highest price possible. The White Knight was also attacked. That one has jumped back, and we see Magnus's screen, the red there, showing his pre-move. Knights leaving the board. The dust is settling. It's still level material. Who will that little melee have favored?
And it comes down to the pawn structure one more time, right? Pawns are the soul of chess. And here we see with everything else equal, is going to be the attack on that c3 weakness that Magnus has, but in return has opened up certain lines for his rook. Let's point out that beautiful bishop on g2, eyeing the b7 weakness. Once the rook slides over to b1, Magnus is going to try to get into Alireza's camp.
So now we're in a situation, both sides, of course, have the bishop pair. They're jostling for position, trying to improve the positions of their pieces. The queen ducking away from the d-file as well, so that it's not forced with tempo. If white decides to put a rook on the d-file, for example, white would obviously like black to take the bishop on e3 so that the recapture with the knight could be possible and starts to improve the position there. But otherwise, the real difference here does come down to pawn structure, and we do see white with those 2 isolated pawns on the A and C line. Not a problem at the moment, but that could be a longer-term weakness.
Definitely. And in the meantime, Magnus looking very calm on the camera. He talked about nerves, but his heart rate is down at 66. Let's take a note of everyone's baseline here. Alireza started the game with a decently high heart rate. It's gone up to almost 100 already. It's a huge, momentous occasion. Who will come out on top? Magnus improving his rook in the meantime. It's his type of position. It's very technical. No big attacks on either side's king. Mutually, kind of lots to be excited about. Alireza with Magnus's weak pawns, but Magnus with his active pieces.
And I like that last move. You were speaking about active pieces. Alireza blunts that bishop on g2 with c6. And right now, Magnus offers his trademark queen trade. Every single player on the planet must think not twice, but 5 times before getting queens off the board against Magnus.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because typically you think, okay, queens off the board, that means there are fewer dynamics in the position to play with. There's the possibility of easier draws in the game compared to when queens are on. Yet Magnus is very happy to do that every single time and find small and subtle ways to get the wins despite this. It's absolutely incredible, and that's probably the reason why Firouzja is moving the queen away.
I love it. It only took him under 20 seconds to decide whether to take the queens off the board or to keep them on. Alireza, he sticks true to his guns, playing to his style. He's a very attacking player, needs the queens, and he's playing against Magnus's biggest strength, the endgame. Take the queens off there, improve the white pawn chain, and you are suffering for the rest of this encounter. Alireza wants to go hunting for Magnus's king. The black queen standing on the edge of the board. Will this threat be blocked? Will she run away? And there we go. The bishop jumps out. That's a pawn sacrifice. Magnus grabs on b7, but Alireza will restore the material balance now.
And in a big way, right? Because you end up putting your queen on those light squares. Looks extremely well placed there with the black knight jumping in. Queen takes pawn to come in next. But Magnus has ideas of his own. That knight can jump to the center of the board, as it does with a double attack on the queen. Pawns are getting off the board here. Is this fizzling out?
Looks like the game is being guided towards equality, but there are enough ingredients left for both sides to get optimistic, especially here. I'm going to say Magnus Carlsen, the white knight, is super powerful. It's a bit of an octopus right now. Its tentacles over 8 squares, covering some important jumping points for the black rooks. The white queen active as well. It looks like it should be level, but it's up to Firouzja to prove it.
Well, Firouzja's got one big trump in the position, his own queen, right, which can start targeting not only the pawns on the left side, the one pawn Magnus has remaining. And a big hello to our live audience there. You know, this has been so awesome. Chess feels alive here in Riyadh. But coming back to the position, you know, Alireza takes a pause right now. That queen can go pawn hunting, as it does, and also defend his own pawn, and a big blunder.
Wow, Magnus frowning. There's a huge move right now. He can trap black's rook in the corner. This is so hidden, so difficult, but will Magnus Carlsen see it? He's frowning. The white knight can go to the b8 square. The black, he's found it, Magnus Carlsen. He's winning the black rook due to some back rank issues here. Double exclamation mark given. Firouzja, he hasn't realized yet, hasn't reacted, but suddenly he finds himself lost.
Firouzja in shock right now. That rook trapped from an innocuous position. It felt like this was fizzling out. All the trades that happened and a one-move blunder. And look at that. You can take the queen, but the rook takes queen comes in with a massive check. It's not checkmate. Firouzja can drop back with the queen, but he lose big material. Magnus Carlsen with a winning advantage here.
That is unbelievable. And out of nowhere, we have an incredible tactic. And suddenly, this is all Magnus Carlsen in game number one. Almost uncharacteristic of Firouzja there, but it's very difficult to spot as well. We've been talking about knights back to the back rank. Your opponent's back rank is what won that piece for Magnus. Incredible.
Yeah, it was so hidden. It was a queen sacrifice. So maybe we show in a slow action replay what just happened, what could have happened if Firouzja had taken the queen. In this position, it was better for the black queen to step elsewhere, maybe give the black king some breathing space instead, because after a queen slide to a3, we saw knight to b8. Such a rare pattern, almost unique, trapping the black rook in the corner, which had to take the knight, had to give itself up for the highest price possible, and then the queen sacrifice. Queen takes rook. If the queen had been captured, we would have seen a rook land, back rank checkmate, had to be blocked by the black queen, and ultimately rook for knight advantage. That is the status quo in the current position as well, if we catch up with the current game, but it's the queens coming off. Might be ending very shortly. Magnus Carlsen is going to pick off black's pawn. The a7 pawn is going to be rook versus knight, but no fortress here. 3 pawns versus 3 pawns on the same flank is known to be a winning endgame. Magnus knows it too.
This is busted for Firouzja. And what a gift this has been in game one. In the very first start, where it looked like Firouzja knew everything that he was doing and doing it absolutely right, keeping control on the clock, taking the pawns off the board, having his own activity, and then a one-move blunder. Unbelievable. Magnus was in shock.
It's out of nowhere. And while that's unbelievably shocking, at the same time, how many times have we said it's come out of nowhere when we're commentating a game involving Magnus Carlsen? He generates these opportunities. He generates his own luck. It's incredible that that's happened. Now we need to look at the reaction of Firouzja. He knows that this first game is probably a loss. However, what can he do about it? What does his mentality look like?
He has to recover from everything that's happened. I think he has to calm himself down. He's not resigning. He's going to try to fight this out, but in his head, somewhere he's getting ready for that fight in game two. Rather than rushing to that after a blunder, many times in our own heads, we're sort of accepting the reality of what's just happened, getting ready for the fight that's coming on, where he will be playing with the white pieces. But how trivial is this endgame as Firouzja tries to set up a fortress?
It still takes time. Magnus will still need to maneuver. At the moment, he's trying to break through with his king. He's going to have to use teamwork here. The white rook and white king need to target the base of black's pawn chain. It's all about the f7 square. Black's got to keep it defended with his king. He's got to use his knight to shield and shoulder away white's king as it tries to approach that pawn.
And if this is a theoretical win for white, how does he break through? At what point does black no longer have any defense against this?
It's when that pawn falls, simply. It's when the white rook lands on the 7th rank and when the king, the white king, is able to approach. At the moment, it can't get any closer, but Magnus now taking away squares from the black knight, for liberating his rook. Easy to kick the black king away, but it's the knight and the jumps there you need to be careful of.
You know, what was so impressive was that pattern, the tactical motive that Firouzja missed on the board and allowed his own rook to get trapped in its starting position was spotted by Magnus in under 1 second. The moment Firouzja moved his queen to the wrong square, Magnus, you could see it on him. He leaned forward. He was locked in. He knew that Firouzja had made a massive blunder.
Look how the black knight is actually trapped on its back rank. No squares. Magnus, almost with a head bob, kind of shaking in the chair now. He knows this is a dream start to him. I'm not going to fault Firouzja at all. That was the most hidden trick, most sneaky tactic I've seen so far at the EWC. And there we go. It's the first result of the grand final.
Resignation in game number one after an incredible tactic out of nowhere. Magnus Carlsen wins game one in set one and takes a very, very strong advantage. Don't forget, it's a best of 3 sets in the grand final, so the comeback mechanic is still there. There's plenty that can still happen. However, it is very much advantage Magnus.
And comebacks are something that Alireza Firouzja is used to. We remind everyone, and you know, of this moment where Magnus, again, endgame, that's easy play for him. Give him an extra rook against the knight. He converted it flawlessly. Beautiful technique there. Just dominating that black minor piece. But it all came down to that move number 21 by Alireza Firouzja. A huge, huge blunder there. Alireza now has to make a comeback, but David, it's something he's done before. In 2024 at the Champions Chess Tour, you know, winning the grand final in an online massive event against Magnus, where the stats were 93% given to Magnus in the winning odds.
Right.
And Alireza did it then. Can he do it again?
That is the big question now, isn't it? But with a 1-0 advantage now, you have to imagine Magnus has the overwhelming odds, at least in the first set. What I will say is that because of the way we are scoring the grand final, you can absolutely blow your opponent away in set 1, and all they have to do is edge the second set by the finest of margins, similar to how it would score in tennis, for example, and you're actually all square going into the decider. So the comeback mechanics here on this biggest of stages is actually quite incredible, and Firouzja is definitely nowhere close to out of it yet.
Even if he loses this first set 3-0, he will know it's just a total wipe, and set 2 is all important. Of course, he will want to strike back. Firouzja is especially dangerous when he has white. He starts this game with the Italian opening, and it's the two knights defense. Look at this, the white knight going pawn hunting. White is going to win a pawn, the black knight pushed to the edge. This is such a trendy line. Firouzja found himself on the black side of this just yesterday in his semi-final against Arjun Erigaisi, and he's taking inspiration from that. Magnus, meanwhile, playing the second most popular move, a bishop block in that position, slowing Firouzja down. This shows Firouzja's aggressive intentions.
This decision by Alireza to go for this line, it's trendy and it's dangerous, right? That's exactly what he needs on the back foot right now. He has to maximize his chances every single game with white. I think that's a very smart decision that Magnus made. You know, with the bishop blocking that check, it's not the usual move. It's not the standard move. Magnus very quickly figured out that Alireza has some deep preparation. Had he gone for the main line, had he pushed that pawn to c6, he avoids that. So he sort of brings Alireza out of his main preparation.
That's going to be so important throughout this match as well, because no doubt both of these players, they know each other so well. They've probably got one or two surprises in their back pocket, but that doesn't mean they're playing all of them on game one, right? So the question is going to be, when do they choose to use those weapons?
This is a full pawn sacrifice, though, we should mention, from Magnus Carlsen, especially after this last turn. He's offering a trade, but it will be 7 pawns against... Oh, sorry, 7 pawns against 6, actually, after this trade. I'm expecting him to take. I'm not sure what Firouzja's thinking about here. Then the kings will castle. Magnus in return might just get centralized pieces, maybe even a bishop pair as some compensation. But here he's showing, maybe learning from that match against Hikaru yesterday, that he doesn't want to just knuckle down forced draws when he's ahead in a match. He wants to seize the moment.
He wants to seize the moment, but I think it's also credits to Firouzja right now. You know, he did not let it away, just looking completely unfazed. Alireza is at the moment after whatever happened in game one. He sort of just let go of that completely. So, and that is a sign of a champion, you know? To come back from a one-move blunder at the biggest stage and go like, there's a whole fight on, the whole day in front of me, and you know, I'm going to make my chances. And that's the opening approach he has. He comes back with the knight, attacks the bishop, a trade at the center. If you pick up the white bishop, that would be a bad idea. Knight takes bishop would come in with a check.
Exactly right. So creating some counter chances there is Firouzja, keeping the position relatively complicated and forcing Magnus Carlsen to keep thinking. Although it is Firouzja that goes down on the clock here. He wants to try and wrangle his way into some sort of advantage. This isn't going to be winning in 1 or 2 moves. That's not the intention. What he wants to do is make Magnus uncomfortable, make him think about his responses twice, sort of start doubting himself, and that's where the micro mistakes start to slip in. They said it in the pre-game interviews where I believe it was Alireza who said, if you're playing Magnus, you are still going to get chances, but if you don't take them, you're going to pay for it. Well, in game number 1, it was Alireza who gave Magnus the chance, pounced on in less than a second, like you mentioned, Tanya. So if we see the reciprocal, we are going to get to see how quickly Alireza responds in kind.
In the meantime, still 1 pawn up for Alireza after that last trade. He's 1.5 minutes down, though, almost, and black has a threat over the next couple of turns of the knight landing in the center. That's going to scare Firouzja somewhat. It's going to slow him down. He might have to take preventative measures or trade off that knight. Either way, Magnus looking very relaxed. You do get the kind of impression here that it is home preparation from Magnus Carlsen. He's only spent a minute. This is a move 11 now. And psychologically, that's difficult if you know you've walked into something your opponent has studied before.
Especially when you're the one who wanted to spring in that early surprise and had a different preparation in mind. You know,
Right.
again, a very smart decision of that black bishop moving to d7 on move 6 by Magnus Carlsen in this game. Now, Alireza has that extra pawn, but it's the lack of development in his pieces. The king's still in the center. For Magnus, the initiative is there. You know, it's ahead in development, the knight jumping to d4. Once you castle, the f-pawn can move up the board, kicking out the knight from the center. Easier to play short term for Magnus Carlsen. Alireza, he still needs to consolidate his position.
I think your points are absolutely spot on here. It's the psychological impact and, if you like, the psychological win of going into your opponent's plan and then throwing him off his game. I mean, 9 minutes plays 6.5 in a game where Firouzja is white and wants to win straight away. Like, to what extent is this going to really damage his preparation for any future surprise weapons he has against Magnus? If this is the response, wow.
Exactly. There are only so many weaknesses in an opponent's opening arsenal and their repertoire. You have to try and target them, but if you walk into something they've studied, that really is a bit of a blow. That being said, the clock situation, we've seen it so many times before. Alireza Firouzja down on time. Even at the 1 minute mark, though, he's a beast. He plays arguably better than anyone if it gets down to a time scramble. At any moment in this match, you've got to favor the younger player here. So he will be trying to keep his time advantage, Magnus Carlsen.
He does need to drag Magnus down to 1 minute as well to push home that advantage, though. If he's got 1 minute and Magnus has 5, not sure how good that's going to be.
Yeah, that's the tricky part, to make these greats think. But he has forced Magnus to pause for the first real time with this last pawn push.
The strategy for Alireza in this match would be surprising if it is to win out of the opening. He's playing against Magnus. How do you even prepare against a guy like that who plays everything under the sun? The aim would be to just get a position, a playable position, which has got those messy tendencies, that little chaos on the board, the complications where he forces Magnus exactly to come where you are. Under 1 minute on the clock,
Yep.
where Alireza, I think he believes he's perhaps even faster than Magnus if that was to appear with all the... Maybe not all, but as many pieces on the board as possible and as much chaos as possible. That's when the match gets truly even.
That's going to be the goal, right? If we see both players get down to a situation where they say have less than 90 seconds on the clock each, and it's a relatively equal position dynamically, but lots of play, Alireza becomes so dangerous. But if in the process of forcing the time down, Magnus is already in a better position, then the plans become easier, it's easier to convert. Even if you're slightly slower, the path to victory is clear. And that's what Alireza needs to stop. The path to victory should never be clear for Magnus, because once he sees it, he's like a homing missile. There's no stopping him.
Exactly. That's why he's so good in the endgames. He knows exactly what to aim for, Magnus Carlsen. In the meantime, this position is fascinating. Give back an extra pawn to black, make it level material, and Magnus has the advantage. Black has the bishop pair. Black's central pawns look glorious, but he does have something to suffer for Alireza, having his extra pawn, and it's just a question of whether he can make it count. The white king in the corner not looking extremely comfortable here. Black's light squared bishop staring at it. Magnus is smiling on the camera in the meantime. Fascinating stuff. He must love his position, but the material imbalance must give Alireza some hope here, Tanya.
I think he's thinking about his bow and arrow right now.
Already?
He's loading up.
Early days, but you know, he got that first shot in.
He did.
And that's something. Or will, you know, Alireza be flying high, fast and precise? Fast, he's not currently. Behind on the clock by about a minute. Magnus, meanwhile, lines up the queen on the G line. Alireza brings his queen closer to the bishop, perhaps trying to neutralize that bishop pair that Magnus has in compensation for the extra pawn. Bishop c5 was the idea, was the threat. We might see it being played out, even though Magnus can now decline the trade after moving the rook away.
Yeah, that's the one thing that Alireza wants. Since he is a pawn up, he wants simplifications, whether it's bishops off the board, rooks off the board, maybe even queens off the board. What Magnus wants is some kind of attack against the white king. Magnus will avoid trades at all costs if he can. And there we see, as Tanya predicted, the bishop trade offered. Dark squared bishops coming off the board would be disastrous for Magnus. It would reduce some of his attacking potential. He's going to dodge that, surely.
You can't afford to trade it. Allow the queen in. Beautiful square for that queen. You can't give up your bishop pair. It is It is the big initiative in the position that Magnus has. But where do you move it to? And he does step away. He answers the question. Bishop to f6, always eyeing that e4 break, which would further open up the diagonals for his two bishops.
White has the potential for a d4 break, but I'm so scared every time I look at this because I think if White has a strong way to respond with e4, I'm worried that the position could blow open in a way that maybe the white pieces don't necessarily want. We could be seeing this played out on the board.
Yeah, things are about to heat up right now. It felt like both sides were just maneuvering. To my eyes, it actually looked like Firouzja was maneuvering slightly better than Magnus here. It felt like Magnus, the black rook, the black queen, not quite coordinating with the rest of their army. So Firouzja deciding to strike. Again, trades here help white. Magnus exchanging this pawn, he will not be happy about that if that comes to pass. But if you don't take it, that white pawn might just continue advancing.
Tension on the board.
We do advance, okay. This is worrying.
Will Firouzja do the same? He does. He kicks away black's light squared bishop from its nice post. Magnus pausing. He could take the white knight. We could start seeing a tactical sequence akin to what we saw earlier in game one, where a bunch of trades happened in breakneck speed. But no, Magnus prefers to retreat. He's going for the white king, while Alireza just wants to consolidate his extra pawn.
But this gives the time to Alireza to retreat his own bishop, again trying to target the trade that he really wants of the dark squared bishop. With the move bishop d4, it could be the moment to use that to blunt out that bishop, take away any possibility of bishop takes knight as well. Lots of options for Alireza, but he needs to keep one eye on the clock, or at least half an eye on the clock.
1 minute difference isn't so dramatic right now, but if we keep saying that every game Firouzja is behind on time, then it might add up by the end of the day. It was the case earlier when he blundered. He was slightly behind on the clock, and he won't want that to repeat as he does retreat his bishop.
Exactly. Spot on, Tanya. We have the d4 square occupied now by the white bishop. Again, trying to force the exchange of the dark squared bishops here. I suppose there is the potential for black to take on f3 first, if we want to spice things up a little bit. I'm not 100% sure who that's better for, though, because even though the bishops are on the board, you swap one pair off and you've got the g-file. And you know what? Black's pieces are pointing menacingly towards white's king, but at the same time, if the g-pawn disappears, a rook can swing across to g1, and it becomes a bit of a double-edged sword.
Yeah, let's show that variation. Let's try and get inside Magnus Carlsen's mind on the analysis board here that we've got up. E takes f3 is the critical move. White here has to recapture. You cannot trade bishops, no time yet. But bishop takes bishop here would have allowed an in-between move, a check on the white king. Now black will trade off, regain the bishop at the very end, level material, and the white king a bit open. Black's bishop probably better than the white knight with pawns on both flanks. At the very end here, though, this is happening. After g takes f3, the white rook sliding across to g1 is white's big idea. Black, in the meantime, is trading off pieces. Let's go back to the game because they're playing exactly what we predicted. The black bishop trying to get active, but in the meantime, white's rook opened up on the g-file. Who is this going to favor? Eval bar says white, but clock says black. Not sure I like this for Magnus, I've got to admit. I think Firouzja's done fantastically well in order to establish a bit of control here in the center.
And I think that central square that you're alluding to, once the knight jumps to that point, the rook lining up on g1, suddenly the bishop pair gone, the knight getting stronger, 4 versus 2 on that left flank. C-pawn starts marching up the board once the knight is out of the way. Also, let's point out, Magnus's last move has a threat. Queen takes pawn in the air, so knight e4, he's inviting him to place it in that beautiful spot, also countering the threat.
I'm guessing that's also part of the reason why the black pawn protects the e3 square if black wanted to infiltrate with a rook. Not sure there's enough time to do that, though, because of the c2 pawn being potentially weak, and also because if the knight jumps into e4, there's a real risk that you end up with a rook on the wrong side of the board without support.
But you know, Alireza, he's not playing the most natural move quickly. There's something about knight e4 because it's screaming to be played. You know, it's the hand move, or in this case, the mouse move, that you really want to rush into playing. But he doesn't like something about it, David.
Yeah, I don't really see why not. Maybe it's the fact that the black bishop has the ability to challenge the light squares. Either way, Alireza, he's tanked for too long on this move. The difference on the clock is telling. They say a pawn is worth a minute, and now he's currently almost 2 minutes down. Magnus is going to be gaining in confidence the longer this position doesn't see a move. Alireza really needs to speed up. It feels like this final so far, there we go. The most natural move just took too long. And okay, Magnus instantly ready with his response.
And that's the problem. You take that long, your opponent knows exactly what he's going to play to the first move that comes to everyone's mind here.
It also signals to Magnus. Alireza has been in the tank. He's thinking about an alternative. While your opponent's time is ticking down, you get to have a think yourself about what other moves he was thinking about, which means later on in the game, you're prepared for those ideas, and you've used your opponent's time to come to that realization.
Exactly. The best players, the most practical players in the world, they have all these little tricks to save a few seconds here and there. Magnus, look how zoned in, how focused he is, despite the fact it's not his move. 2.5 minute time difference now. You need to either move that knight or defend it. It's that simple.
I'd be staring at the RGB on the keyboard. That would be too distracting for me. I don't think I could handle it. More pieces piling on the knight on e4 now. And look at the time difference. 4 minutes plays a minute 20. This is becoming critical for Alireza.
And he's trying to desperately calculate here with this remaining minute what will happen if Black next move takes this knight. You can take with the bishop, maybe even with the rook, and tactics will start to land on this board. The white king in the corner is very, very vulnerable. Endgames might be imminent, but Firouzja just doesn't have time to work them out. He's spending way too long. 1 minute versus 4 now.
He's thinking for far too long in this game. I mean, this is just unbelievable, right? Because we're on move 27 and the biggest decisions lie ahead right now. Magnus Carlsen, he might be down upon, but he's not going to make your life easy. Now there are tactics. This is what you need to think. And the board goes red, the clock goes red for Alireza.
Move. Come on, you have to move. Push your pawn to d6, do whatever. Move a rook. You are fine.
35 seconds. He's frozen.
Alireza Firouzja freezing there, making a rook move. And look at this counter-strike by Magnus Carlsen, taking the white knight off the board, double exclamation mark. He's counter-attacking against the white queen. Look at what's about to happen. All the rooks coming off. White's 2 rooks are forked there. One of them had to give their life up. Magnus has equalized this endgame. It's level, but not on the clock.
And Magnus is now going to play to flag Alireza Firouzja. His rook, the more active one. Magnus about to pick up the d5 center pawn. He's just thinking, does he throw in the check? He decides not to. And that is Magnus Carlsen thinking to himself. He knows this is a draw. Is he going to play for dirty flagging with 26 seconds for his opponent?
Have to be ruthless here if you're Magnus Carlsen. Do not let your opponent off the hook. Firouzja, if the shoe was on the other foot, he would be playing for time right now.
3.5 minutes versus 26 seconds. At this point, it's not dirty, it's expected.
He plays on. He 100% plays on. He's going to play this on even with an hour on the clock. It's an endgame. You know, he sees the imbalances, and look at that. He thought he'd force Alireza into a think about this, and Alireza makes a wrong decision. This is what happens when you have no time on the clock against the world number 1.
Exactly. It's easy for Black to create a pass pawn on the right flank on the king side, 3 versus 2. Very difficult actually for White's 3 to mobilize because Black's 2 doubled B pawns hold the fort. The White 3 cannot bypass them. The Black king is coming. It was actually better there for the Black B pawn to push even further to B4. That's a very natural move though from Magnus, and Alireza simply physically does not have enough time to finish this game. Under 20 seconds now. Some big decisions still ahead. Magnus, a bit of a shake of the head. Firouzja there, echoing that. Same for him. He knows he's going to get flagged.
One of Firouzja's biggest strength is just the number of moves, the sheer number of moves he can get in under 20 seconds. But this position, where every move needs to be calculated, every mistake can be a losing move, that is hard. 17 seconds, David, Magnus gets this done.
You would say that, but Firouzja, this last move is fantastic. The white king is holding the black king. It's keeping it honest. If the black king ever gives way, the white king steps forward. Firouzja with 16 seconds. It's actually quite an easy draw now. But does he have time? That's the big question. Magnus has really slowed down.
This would be god-level hold by Alireza Firouzja if he manages to save this king-pawn ending with only 15 seconds against Magnus.
Magnus smiling because he knows it's a dead draw. There's no way through for the black king into the white half of the board. The black king can try all at once, but there's no path forward, and the kings are already starting to dance.
It's a fortress and a repetition.
Draw by repetition. 2 minutes and 2 seconds plays 14 seconds, but we were reduced to a position where all Alireza Firouzja had to do was move the kings backwards and forwards. An attempt was made to see if a mistake could be forced under time pressure, but Alireza hold. Magnus Carlsen 1.5, Alireza Firouzja a half.
That was bizarre. That is Magnus being merciful, I've got to say. He could have played that position on for 50 moves. He could have desperately tried to flag Alireza. White could do nothing. He could just move the king around the board. But Magnus letting his opponent off the hook. Will he regret that later, Tanya?
That's the big question, and only time will tell. But I will say that was a god-level save by Alireza Firouzja. And there was that moment when Magnus, not only on the clock, but on the board, was completely winning. These last few moves, yes, technically a complete drawn ending. Black having no inwards, no path towards that victory. Alireza had built that fortress, and this time turns out Magnus believed in those fortresses.
Yeah, the way that we got to that dead drawn ending was anything but dead boring. It was a very exciting back and forth game. Ultimately, though, it means that a win in the next game would take the first set for Magnus, but we need to get a full point in order for that to happen. So right now, set 1 continues. We will be resuming with game number 3 after this break.
We are here outside the SNB Esports Arena awaiting the finals, and if you can see in the background, the line to get in stretches from door to door, more than 100 people deep. We've pulled this gentleman out of line to hear why he has come here. First of all, tell us your name.
Musa Bintali.
And I understand you're not just an average fan. Who are you?
No, I'm the head of the Olympic Chess Committee, handling the chess players in Saudi Arabia.
He's head of the Olympic Chess Committee, and he still has to wait in line like the average fans do. We got to get you some special connections. But tell us, who are you rooting for, Team Liquid or Team Falcons?
Falcon, of course, but I'm enjoying the general competition.
And finally, I mean, the best chess players in the world came to your country. Hasn't happened in many years, since 2017. What's it like to have all the top players here?
Absolutely fun times. It is a fantastic opportunity for every chess lover in Saudi Arabia and the surrounding countries to come and see. It's a unique tournament. People are playing with a historical game in a futuristic manner. We all love it.
We're going to get back inside. I've been told it's hot even by Saudi standards. You don't want to lose your place. That's what the action looks like from outside SNB Esports Arena.
We have started the grand finals here at the Esports World Cup. We are deep into the first set. 1.5-1/2, the current score in favor of Magnus Carlsen, the world number 1. Each set is a best of 4, the first 2 anyway, and if needed, we will have a best of 2 in a deciding set. Right now, a full point for Magnus Carlsen will clinch the first set. A draw will mean we still have to keep playing, and of course, a win for Alireza Firouzja will mean we are all square.
And there we see the heart rate monitor being adjusted. I'm sure the heart rates are through the roof. I know they are here in our caster studio.
Can they adjust mine down? That'd be great. I need maybe some an app control or something. That'd be really handy.
That would help because you need to keep your nerves in these matchups. And for Alireza Firouzja, he is a point deficit in this set 1. But it's early days, 2 games in. And I think that second game you could feel, even though Alireza was in trouble at the very end, took too much time, but at least he found the rhythm on the board. Now, he needs to just make sure he doesn't come down on the clock the way it's been. I think he's got to up his time management.
It has been a weakness of his, Alireza Firouzja's, in classical chess and rapid chess, that he does spend a bit too much time in the middle game, but just not leaving himself enough leeway in the ending. There, he escaped, but he will not escape too many times in future.
The clock looked okay up until the point in that late middle game where suddenly, over the course of just a couple of moves, it felt like Firouzja tanked, what, 2-3 minutes? Which is maybe fine in the first 12 moves if you have some sort of surprise. Definitely not if it results in 4v1. I mean, those are the kind of odds that you that you see chess players giving each other in social settings for fun when you're trying to beat a weaker player, for example. It's not the kind of thing you want to be doing at this level.
What do you guys think? The jackets are off. The gloves are definitely off in this finals. But
yes.
Is he going to put that back on? I think not. That usually means he's ready for a fight in this one. Alireza Firouzja is. But he'll start with the black pieces. What is going to be his game strategy in this one?
Well, it's a must-not-lose game, right? It's a kind of set point for Magnus Carlsen. If he strikes with white, he reaches the 2.5 point mark. Out of 4, that means he wins the set. And Alireza with black, he just needs to do what he did in the first game up to a point, just not blunder that rook in the corner. I wouldn't be surprised, actually, if Alireza repeats a similar opening. It was semi-successful. I would say a draw, not the worst result. Alireza will fancy his chances with white more than he will with black.
Meanwhile, Magnus not amused with the delay.
It looks like
ready
there
to get going.
might be a little bit of an audio issue, but it looks like, to be honest, it looks like it's doing okay and that it might be resolved very shortly. So this is game number 2. How we got to this position, it was a wild game.
It was a wild game. Magnus sacrificed a pawn early. He got the bishop pair in return. We saw some early exchanges, and ultimately it was around here that Firouzja started to tank. But when the dust settled, we got to a rook endgame, even a king and pawn endgame that was temporarily winning for Magnus. In the end, though, he had to settle for a repetition, a draw. Firouzja had no time, but Magnus had no way through.
He had no way through, but he could play that position on forever, and ultimately Firouzja would have flagged. I think Magnus, you know, he's also such a sportsman. I think somewhere he just couldn't get himself to continue in that position, knowing that on the board, there are no inroads.
Maybe it's a bit of a gambit. Magnus not trying to flag Firouzja there. If it comes down to a later game when the shoe is on the other foot, maybe he's hoping Firouzja doesn't try to flag him if it's a dead-drawn endgame.
I mean, oh, come on. We've got $250,000 and 1,000 points at the Esports World Cup Club Championship at stake here. Are we reliant on charity? Are we reliant on mercy?
Sportsmanship?
Nothing. Everything is earned, David. You're right. I can see it potentially happening. I think maybe Magnus recognized that all the pawns on the 3rd rank meant that you could just shuffle the king. And at that point, it was like, fine. But I don't think you want to be giving away favors here.
But you know, Magnus has done that before. When his opponent has blundered with a mouse slip and lost on the spot, he sort of returned the favor in the very next game by doing exactly the same, just to level the score and saying reset, let's go.
Let me suggest something subtly different. Magnus does that because he is so certain that he is going to win over the board. He is so certain that under normal circumstances, without the mouse slips, without the mistakes, without the flagging, he would win anyway, that he gives it back not out of mercy, out of confidence.
It's possible. It's possible. Who knows when it comes to Magnus Carlsen? Very mood dependent. In the meantime, we see the Caro-Kann defense. And here, black setting up with the Fianchetto, white doing the same. Alireza played this queen move against Nodibek Abdusattorov. He used it just yesterday. Just the day before, even in the quarterfinals. And Magnus pausing, that shows a lack of homework, I'm going to say. Magnus should have been studying Alireza's games. Pause here, surprising.
The first thing there by Magnus after the queen move. And I think what he wants to do now is think about expanding, not in the center, because if you push the d pawn, you're opening up Alireza's sniper on g7. But he wanted to go b4 next, which now has been stopped by Alireza with that last move a5, so not allowing. And I was thinking this is not going to happen, but Magnus says game on, d4 on the board. This is going to be maximum tension, a 4-pawn stare-off.
If you're not going to let me play b4, then fine, let's do this anyway. I wonder how this is going to end up for the players.
Yeah, a lot of choice now for Alireza. He can resolve the tension immediately. He can capture one of white's central pawns, or he can wait, maybe develop the knight that hasn't yet entered the action. Either way, Alireza now has been surprised. Magnus with the jacket off meaning business. Maybe he had studied this before. Maybe just that pause was to recollect things, to lull Firouzja into that false sense of security. We do see a trade. Magnus takes back with his knight, not giving himself the big pawn center, maybe reluctant to get isolated pawns there. But now it looks like the whole center will liquidate. It's going to be symmetry a bit later on. And it's going to be about who can profit from that scenario.
And so many knight jumps once that pawn trade at the center of the board happens, because pawn takes pawn will definitely be met by the knight recapturing.
Right.
You know, Alireza isn't going to give a weakness at the center of the board. We can expect then Magnus's knight to jump at the center, or will he just do Magnus things? One move that Magnus loves to play is pushing the h-pawn forward. Whether he's castled the king or not, h4 always on the cards. Modern chess, when in doubt, play h4.
Yeah, what do you foresee? Is it going to happen? Is Magnus going to resolve the central tension or play on the wings?
Big question. Does he want to keep the tension right now or add to it?
I don't mind if it's Magnus or anybody else. I just want to see h4 on the board. So I'm very, very keen.
I'll say one thing though, John. If h4 happens, I think Alireza stops the advance. You really don't want that pawn to go all alpha 0. In this case, alpha Magnus on you with h5 coming in and then a potential h6.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. I think the logical response to h4 is h5, admittedly. And then from that point onwards, it's a little bit harder to get super excited about it, because the follow-up to build that kingside attack, especially with the bishops pointing at the queen side, might be a little bit more difficult. But h4 certainly worth a try.
Yep, so no wing play against the falcon yet. Instead, it's some knight action as we see Magnus the first to blink. He trades off a bishop for knight. A very controversial decision, I'm going to say, because he's parted with his beautiful light squared bishop, the white king, a bit airy on those light squares. But Magnus laughing, smiling again, looking very, very happy with his position. He gained a tempo against the black queen, which is forced home. But now the white knight on c4 is hit and needs to decide. Magnus seems in very good spirits. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing for Firouzja.
Usually that's a bad thing. You know, Magnus is the strongest player on the planet any day, but when he comes in a good mood, he's enjoying his chess. He knows he's up in the match already, feeling the floor in his position. Now, he's taking a decision. Does he go aggressive with his knight? Knight d6? Or is he going to have a more cautious approach? Just come back to the center of the board. Knight to e3 was what I was going to suggest. And then I just realized that knight e3 is probably the one square you don't want to move it to. That bishop on f4 would have been trapped, but look at that.
Oh, hello.
Magnus Carlsen inviting a lot of complications. Bishop d6.
Yep, that's a double attack. It is a fork on the black rook and the black knight. Magnus now looking up to the skies. He's pretty much forced Firouzja here to take his knight. The white bishop's going to take the black knight. Taking the rook would have led to a material deficit for Magnus, 2 pieces against a rook. So now it's level material, but the black rook can save itself. Don't know why Firouzja's pausing here. Rook to e8 is the most logical move in the position, and he's playing against the bishop pair, Magnus.
And that's the surprising part, right? He's also helped Firouzja get rid of that problem in the center, the pawn that was there, and now after all these trades, it's going to be Firouzja getting his bishop to h3 with even potential checkmating ideas. The kiss of death on g2 if the queen and the bishop can line up against that white king. This is going to be Magnus on the defense for a long time.
The weaknesses on the light squares, you're right. The fact that that king feels just a little bit airy means that in the long run, this doesn't feel comfortable. It's not necessarily hugely advantageous or anything like that, but certainly a situation where you might have to defend for a little while before you can spot your opportunity. So it'll be interesting to see how they choose to respond to this.
And Falcons are here is what we saw on the screen. You know, Hikaru Nakamura already getting the 3rd place for Falcons. Alireza Firouzja fighting for the crown right now. They're definitely here. They've arrived.
Yeah, I saw some of Magnus's liquid teammates as well in the arena. It feels like everyone is out in full support today for this grand final. This is, again, just the beginning, just set 1, but still plenty of action ahead. The white queen comes out. I was going to at least suggest that Magnus tries to get the queens off the board as soon as possible to avoid any checkmating ideas. Magnus doesn't look happy in the meantime, reacting somewhat there. Position still in the balance, despite the fact black does have those hugely potentialed bishops.
You know, I think it comes down to that sequence of moves that just happened with the trades of the knight at the center of the board. Magnus kind of with a smile putting the bishop forward. But at the end of it all, when the dust is settled, Magnus realizes that this is not what he was aiming for. You know, as you evaluate this position, and look at that, we were talking about h4, it's Alireza on the attack. Magnus has to stop it. He does, but it further creates those light square weaknesses. Now the bishop can plant itself on g4.
There are some developmental questions to ask as well, because you want to really get the light squared bishop off its starting square for black at some point. You can't move the b pawn, you can't play b6 because the queen would take the rook on a8. Please, not for the second time in this match. But you move that, and then where are you going? Do we get the queen out first? Oh, unfortunately, the rook on e8 would then get taken. You want to move the bishop out instead to e6 or f5? Well, guess what? The knight's there to gobble it up. It's actually not super clear how Firouzja completes development and continues on this game, even though his position looks comfortable right now.
Yeah, he's going to have to calculate. He's going to have to be very concrete about his mode of development here, Alireza Firouzja. One idea would be to bring the bishop out, as Tanya mentioned, and if the white queen captures a pawn, then on the b7 square, the black rook will slide across with some action of its own on the b file. It's a long sequence going through his mind, Alireza Firouzja. He's trying to prove here that the bishop pair is the superior piece configuration, but it's not going to be easy at all. And let's just show that on the board for everyone at home. Bishop to g4 is the move he wanted to play. He actually plays his rook out, which is very surprising, but bishop to g4 would have allowed the queen to capture a pawn and the rook to slide across. And next move, when the queen retreats, rook takes pawn on b2, after maybe a rook trade, and this would have led to some big complications. But maybe we go back to the game, because this was something he wanted to avoid. The bishop would have had to retreat. Instead, Magnus desperately trying to offer a trade of queens. So we saw two different types of positions there. Firouzja choosing not to set the board alight. He's going more positional. Maybe now forced to trade if he's not going to drop the c4 pawn.
And I don't think it matters if Alireza has a clear sequence of moves that gives him advantage. He just needs to keep this imbalance of the bishop pair. He needs to make sure that as many pieces as can remain on the board, and this is the kind of position where he needs to bring Magnus to that bullet territory. That's when his odds would increase. While saying that, he first gets the queens off, now puts the bishop on g4, hits the knight, aiming with that rook lift to activate it further. But even in this endgame, I think that's his plan. Just bring Magnus down on the clock. He's got something to play for here.
He was trying endlessly to avoid playing the Magnus-style game, moving the queen away in the last game when the queen trade was offered. This time around, he's saying, look, relatively equal on the clock. Let's actually get the queens off the board and see what we can do.
Ooh, and he brings his rook up. He's actually aiming to shuffle that rook across to the b5 square and go for white's queenside pawns once the bishop saves itself. Very, very sneaky from Alireza. That is a bit of a genius move, I'm going to say, because he's actually allowing what looks like a desirable bishop trade for Magnus Carlsen. The bishop could have gone to d4, and the black rook sliding across would now have been super effective. Let's say a bishop trade happens, and you cannot defend your b-pawn since the black bishop drops back and hits the white rook on b1. The pawn on b2 would have dropped next move. So Magnus Carlsen instead forced onto the defensive. The white bishop has been sidelined. Tanya, this just looks grim for white, although maybe with the rook trade he's going to hold it now.
You know, the bar says this position's level, and I think the rook trade, it will happen because you really want to put your rook on f5. You're not only putting it on this really weird square, but also taking away the escape route of your own bishop. But after rook takes rook, the big question is how much does Alireza believe in his chances, and does he play on this position? Very close to a Magnus hold this one. And I think that would be a relief for Magnus.
One word, fortress. He might have no way to break through Alireza Firouzja, just like he made that fortress for Magnus last game.
It might be the case where Magnus would start believing in fortresses himself. The rooks come off. Bishop to b1. That's the idea that I would be concerned about. That a2 pawn, how are you defending it?
Not sure, actually, at the moment. And it takes two tempi as well to move that pawn too. So I wonder what's going to happen here and whether that is simply the line. Is there maybe a counter punch somewhere that that white can do? Or is this one of those situations where even if we have a pawn in balance and we go a pawn up, it's not enough to convert?
I'm pretty sure Magnus has missed this, by the way. I don't think he's seen this idea. We haven't seen a reaction on the camera from him yet. I think he's trying to keep a poker face, but if that move lands, Magnus is going to have to scramble to try and hold equality. Eval bar still says 0.0, but not obvious how white holds that one.
That would be that would be Alireza returning the favor from game 1. It was the b8 square the knight landed on in game over. But for some reason, Alireza decides to keep the balance, doesn't put his bishop on b1, but it's a threat that you need to watch out for. Magnus's knight gets active, stopped that check on e7. Alireza brings his king forward. David, this is not as simple as it looks for white.
This is horrible for white. It's a 2-result game for everyone at home who might be wondering what that means. It means black should be out of danger. It's going to be either a win for black if Magnus is unable to defend, or a draw if he can build a fortress. Very minimal chances that white wins this one.
Now, let's see to what extent the clock is going to play a role in this game as well. Magnus Carlsen, 4 minutes 40, playing just under 3 minutes for Alireza Firouzja. You know what? He had 4 versus 1 in the previous game, so frankly, this is already a little bit better, but he needs to not go in the tank now.
And Alireza can start dominating that knight that has jumped too far away with no squares to return. And look at that bishop on e4, the black king heading towards the center of the board, combining all these ideas. The only thing, he needs to move fast, Alireza does, for a real shot at winning and equalizing this match.
2.5 minutes, he's got to speed up. The heart rate has been rising for Alireza. He needs to, I was going to say, bring the king across, dominate that knight. He was scared of the white pawn stepping forward to the a4 square, given a question mark, but now Magnus has a small window of opportunity. He needs to get his knight out of the black camp as quickly as he can. That move hits the black bishop in the process. Magnus should be saving himself and escaping, but he has to evacuate that piece. There we go. First step, now he'll move the white bishop out the way, and the white knight returns to safety.
That was a big moment, you know, to have tried to trap that knight, those sequence of moves. Again, it comes down to clock because Alireza is also trying to play fast. And that is when these inaccuracies happen. He does retreat with the bishop and it's still level, but white's the one who's suffering in this position.
We need Firouzja to hit that god mode. We need him to start calculating with immense speed and trusting his instincts maybe a little bit more and absolutely going for it so that he doesn't end up in a situation where he risks making a critical mistake with under a minute left on the clock. We need to see that from him now so that that isn't a possibility later.
You know what he's done with this bishop maneuver is to get that critical move going. And I think at some point, g5 is the break that Alireza is hoping for. That pawn on the right side of the board moves forward, and then we might see Magnus stuck with the weakness of the g3 pawn. But he has to time it well, and time is a luxury that Alireza does not have.
Needs to go for it. Pawn to g5. He needs to actually accelerate the play. He's being very, very patient, Firouzja, and normally I never fault that. It's a great skill in chess, but you can't be patient with 2 minutes on your clock. You need a clear path forward, and there we go. Pawn to g5. Has he timed it correctly? He's going for it, but he's allowed Magnus to drop back with a knight, attacking a bunch of things, attacking black's dark square bishop and those pawns that have advanced. Firouzja shaking his head. He might have just let Magnus off the hook.
And it was all about making this move at the right time. And he didn't. Knight e4, Firouzja is about to lose his bishop advantage. To keep it, he has to now trade on f4, fall back with his own bishop just to make sure that the game keeps going. But that leaves him with a big weakness on h5. The white knight can start targeting that pawn.
Magnus locks up the king side. The knight move is coming. Knight to g3. Firouzja has to be careful here. He needs to pull the break here and now. 1.5 minutes. He's no longer better.
But how do you even do that? If you try to get rid of that knight, it's heading to g3 to pick up that h5 pawn. Knight g3, and I think what he wants is bishop to d7 to win that f5 pawn in return. This is what Firouzja has set up. Magnus Carlsen, is he sensing his opportunity right now?
This is Firouzja's plan. Magnus sees it and is looking for a way forward. Ultimately, the eval bar says 0.0. It looks like both sides have a way towards a draw, but again, how hard is Magnus going to press on the clock? He moves his bishop out the way. White knight, okay, could have gone back there. Instead, the king defends the pawn. Black's dark square bishop can't really move. Can't really get around.
And that's what Magnus did with his bishop move, right? He took away all the squares that Alireza's dark squared bishop had to give a check to that white king. Can't go to d8, can't go to d6. Alireza comes back with his own bishop. Magnus can repeat. Magnus can bring his king back right now if he wants to stop the game.
He's got that option. Will he choose to exercise it? 2 minutes 40, plays a minute 04. I think he'll probably play on a little bit, but is there a... I'm looking for a second avenue of attack. It really does look like everything is hinging on whether an attack against the h5 pawn can be repelled.
And you just cannot let the black dark squared bishop in Magnus Carlsen. He's trying to make sure that he doesn't allow any counterplay. He retreats his king. This is the second time we've seen that position. Oh, Alireza goes for the win this time. He could have forced a draw instantly by bringing his bishop back. He actually goes around. He's trying to check the white king. That is potentially very dangerous. The black bishop not only will check the white king, but it's going to go behind and start snacking on the base of white's queenside pawn chain. Magnus here, he's the one who has to pull the brakes this time. This is a very scary threat he's facing.
That is huge. If Magnus allows that, the whole house collapses on the left side of the board. He's going for a counter-attack of his own, attacking h5. This has suddenly become a 3-result endgame.
Wow, he's let the black bishop in. This is really brave. Is it going to be foolhardy for Magnus Carlsen? The bishop gets in. Look at the eval bar. It's dropping. It's in black's favor. Alireza's got in. Magnus is trying to shut the door with his own bishop. But is it going to be enough?
That is the big question. He's defended one pawn. Can he defend the other pawn? Magnus Carlsen retreats the knight to do just that. Alireza has to activate the other bishop, gives a check to Magnus's king, falls back, 43 seconds on the clock. A minute deficit for Alireza, but Alireza is the one who's playing for a win.
Oh, I don't know. That black dark square bishop on b2 is trapped. He holds the white king away from moving towards it for now. But Alireza, he's playing without a piece. That black dark square bishop on b2 could potentially be doomed. Magnus can just sit now. Black has no winning plan. Magnus has built a fortress. 28 seconds for Firouzja. Will we see a repeat of what just happened in game 2? The players starting to move their pieces back and forth.
Or will this time Magnus Carlsen try to flag Alireza with the bishop trapped? And there Magnus, he's repeating again. He doesn't want to play on.
The eval bar says Magnus actually has an advantage, but he doesn't realize it. And we see a draw by repetition for the second time in this first set.
Game number 3 ends peacefully but reluctantly. Magnus Carlsen now takes a 2-1 lead into the final regulation game of this first set. A draw is all he needs now to take the first set of the grand finals.
That is crazy what just happened. It looked like Alireza was back in the game, in that end game. That inaccuracy by Magnus, a slight head shake as Alireza realizes his missed opportunity there. But Magnus not continuing, not playing on for the second time in the match. There's conspiracy theory here, but I think Magnus wants to get it done only on the board.
Yeah, Magnus, he's only got half an eye, if that, on the clock so far. He has been quicker than Firouzja. I think maybe he's watching his own clock more, but he hasn't been trying to win by flag. As we see on the top right of your screens there, super high accuracy this game from both players. Very high quality chess, 94, 95% accuracy from both. Ultimately, Magnus built a fortress. He held it, but it wasn't easy.
Game number 4 coming up, and this is a must-win situation for Alireza Firouzja. If we want to take set number 1 to Armageddon, he now has to win on command. He has got the white pieces, so if ever there was a time to do it, it is now, but no second chances.
And he needs to take inspiration from his Falcons teammate Tanya Hikaru, who struck back twice against Magnus.
And what a match that was. He needs to do just that. Not look too far away, but soar pretty high in the sky. With the white pieces, Alireza Firouzja, will he go for the attack that he did in game 2? Will we see another king's pawn opening? The 2 knights defense. Will the knight move forward early on? Alireza trying to figure all that out. What will be his opening approach against the world number 1? Looking for a must-win here is Alireza.
Nice images there. Some Magnus fans in the arena. It's not just the Falcons represented.
Absolutely not. With the keys in the background as well, they want to see their man put the key into the trophy, grab that 1,000 points for the club championship. We'll see if he can take a concrete first step towards doing that now. This has the potential to be the last game of the first set. Will Carlsen get it over the line?
And Magnus switches it up, not allowing Alireza with a knight jump to g5. The earlier game where Magnus had first developed with his own knight, this time starts with the bishop, so taking away that possibility, making it a slower game.
Yes, it's a slow version of the Italian game, the Gyokyo piano, as they sometimes call it. White pawn pushes on the queen side. He was trying to trap black's dark squared bishop. Magnus says no. He's created a nice hiding spot for it. But this is actually something we saw earlier in the event, in the clash between Wei Yi and Sindarov. In that match, it was Sindarov striking out very quickly in the center with black, with a pawn push to d5. and it rebounded very, very quickly. So who's done the better homework? Who's this position going to favor? Full of tension. A good choice, I think, by Alireza Firouzja, keeping all the pieces on the board in his quest to strike back.
And again, these openings, so much about the nuances and the subtleties of where your pawns are, where your bishops are placed. Will he move it back to b3? Will he bring the rook next to that central file? Magnus has done his homework. He doesn't go for that d5 break, which was premature earlier on in the game. And h3, taking away bishop to g4. No pins there. Magnus retreats with his own bishop, and we see thematic plans being played out here.
This is very standard stuff for the Italian game. It's all about maneuvering up until around move 20 when things often start to open up. But for now, one black knight is landing on the g6 square. Those two black knights are going to act as guardians of the black king, maybe leaping forward if given the opportunity to attack. And normally the white knight does the same. It echoes by going back to f1 and parking itself on g3. Only then will they decide what to do with the center, with the rest of their pieces.
And usually in this opening, it's sort of a slow KG start where pieces are placed at these different optimal squares, and then one side breaks. Either black goes d5 or white strikes with d4. And if you're able to get that, if white gets it successfully, gets that edge. If black's able to break out, is able to neutralize white's opening advantage. I'm expecting d4 to happen very soon.
Now we're talking about edges here as well. We mentioned a few times when we saw the Catalans that when one side strikes out, we see fireworks on the board really quickly, super sharp, really quite entertaining tactical chess. Are we saying that when the breaks happen here, it won't quite be as explosive because we're actually still looking for a positional edge? Is that what we're expecting?
Yes, pretty much. And
right.
Talking of positional edge, it's Magnus who gets there first in the center. Normally white, because it's so symmetrical and you get the honor of the first move in chess, you were the first one to occupy the center, but Magnus, he's trying to use some tactics in his favor to get there. And here, breaking the tension with white might just backfire. Alireza Firouzja, he has options, but if he takes the pawn in the center, the black knight retakes. And here, for example, if white tries to continue munching on pawns, we would see a cool tactic after a knight trade. And the rook recapturing. Bishop takes f2. Watch out for this one, everyone at home. Always look for checks and captures. The king retaking would allow a queen check, a double attack, hitting the king, winning the rook on the next move. And Alireza, of course, he dodges that and instead develops his bishop. So watch out for that tactic to persist. Black's sniper on a7, still looking very, very strong. Tanya, it feels like Magnus should be relatively happy with the outcome here.
With the black pieces again, right, you get a successful d5 against the Spanish or against the Italian, you are a happy camper. Magnus's knight on d5, now the pawn on e5 defended, and that bishop on a7 is beautifully placed, always targeting the f2 pawn. Queen headed to f6 at the right point. The black knight can jump over to f4 or h4. I think this is a very, very pleasant opening outcome for Magnus. And for Alireza, he can't be pleased with what's just happened. Yes, he's got space on the queen side, but what's next?
He's going back to basics, Alireza. I've been watching his game since he burst onto the scene, even before he was a teenager, and he's been playing the Italian game, game in, game out. He went away from it for a few years, but he's back to his favorite opening. That shows he believes that his nature, his style can hit Magnus Carlsen.
I'm a little worried, though, because maybe he'll be able to hit against Magnus Carlsen over the board. Unfortunately, he's very close to getting into a 3-minute deficit. And okay, it's 9 versus 6 rather than 4 versus 1. So I don't want to overhype the moment, but if Magnus recognizes this opportunity and continues to play quickly, he now has an excellent way of piling an enormous amount of pressure on Firouzja. In a game, don't forget, he must win.
Yeah, and there's so much more to chess. Of course, it's about good moves, but sometimes if you know that you spend a lot of time in the middle game, often choosing openings where you can land 20 quick moves and kind of clarify half the board, that just saves you a bit of time, puts it in the bank for later. Alireza, though, he loves maximum tension. He loves using maximum time and getting down to that adrenaline-packed last few minutes.
I think it's time to get concerned about Alireza's clock right now. You know, it's early days in the game, but there are a lot of pieces. Nothing's been traded off. Only a set of pawns right now. So a lot of critical positions, decisions do lie ahead here. And it also shows the confidence and the style of the position, the nature of the game that is as right now. For Magnus, I think it just suits him. It's easy play, pieces are developed, no big weaknesses. Alireza, where are those complications? Where is that chaos that he thrives in? It's still a far way off. And the problem is, when and if that does happen, he will not have enough time.
Also, let's be honest, the going down on the clock and really struggling under pressure, okay, can be a bit of a coincidence once, but multiple times it's becoming a little bit of a pattern, and it's something that Alireza needs to psychologically break out of. Otherwise, Magnus will continue doing this and using it as a weapon against him all throughout the grand final. If this is what Magnus has to do to win $250,000 and first place at the Esports World Cup, he will absolutely keep doing it. He's got no reason to change anything up.
Yeah, Magnus, if it comes down to flagging, he's avoided that option twice now in games 2 and 3. But if it comes down to the final game, the final Armageddon, a flag is the only thing between him and first prize for Team Liquid. Magnus is going to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Also, I think if at any moment Magnus is behind in a set, he definitely does it. He goes on to play that position 100 out of 100 times, which he did. I mean, there's so much history between these two players, and somewhere, with Magnus's mindset, how he approaches this new generation, the challenge that he truly relishes, playing against Alireza, against Gukesh, Nodebek. Somewhere you get what he's doing. He wants to try to prove his domination with the moves on the board. He wants chess to speak for itself. And the clock, sure, it's a factor, but right now he doesn't, perhaps thinks, that he doesn't need it. I mean, this storyline goes back. Meanwhile, a move on the board. Alireza does attack Magnus's knight. It moves forward. This is starting to get a little tricky for White.
And we glimpsed Alireza's screen a moment ago. He just pushed his c-pawn forward 1 square, but his mouse was still hovering over this pawn. It looked like he was getting ready to push it yet again in order to block in Black's dart squared bishop. We talked about that sniper, some tricks in the air. It looked like he was going to play that, but again, not trusting his instincts. His mouse was ready to make that move, pushing the pawn forward to the c5 square, but he's paused and, okay, changing his mind now. He first takes the Black Knight, which will be replaced by a pawn, or maybe the other Black Knight, barring a sacrifice of the e5 pawn. And Alireza, the clock time, 4.5 minutes down. Something's just off with the pace. He needs to speed up, as well as try to land a blow on the board.
He's so good when his clock runs down, but again, not when he allows his opponent such a big advantage on the clock. We choose to recapture here with the knight.
And yet another pawn sacrifice, the second time Magnus has offered up this pawn in the center on e5. Again, it feels poisoned, taking the bait like that, especially with the knight near your king, especially with the black dart square bishop poised, feels wrong. I think in the center there, Black's rook would open up, Black's light squared bishop would have jumped out the way, and it would have been disaster. So ultimately, he does play this idea that he was hinting at with his mouse over there on c5. And Black's bishop on a7, not too happy. I do like this last move from Firouzja. He's asking Magnus some questions.
So c5 here has the potential to completely lock out that long diagonal for the bishop. If you really wanted to lock it down, which I don't think he needs to at this time, you could even push a5 to drive the point home. The light squared bishop on a great square, which is probably why it instantly gets traded off. And yeah, Magnus not particularly happy with the lack of scope for the dark squared bishop in the long run. Why not lash out at this straight away?
This is getting fun now because there's a lot of tension on that left flank, but also big knight jumps on that right side as well of the board. The white knight also heading to f5, but I like this approach by Magnus. He's targeting the base of that mini pawn chain to try to activate his bishop on a7. The one move you definitely don't want to make is pawn takes pawn. You double up the a-pawns, you allow the bishop to slide over, pick up the c5 pawn, and come under a lot of pressure on the a-file. And it's under these pressure moments that mistakes happen. And for Alireza, an inaccuracy on the board. He tries to complicate matter under 3 minutes. d4. And a lot of tension there. Which pawn is Magnus going to pick up?
Yeah, probably this pawn that's just pushed, given a question mark. I just want to mention, Magnus has not spent over 30 seconds for a single move so far in this game. That one he spends 22 seconds on. He opens up the lines of the rooks. One set of rooks leave the board. I don't really see what Alireza has in mind, though. That whole left flank is exploding. The pawn chain has been eroded. Black's bishop, it's only a matter of time before it gets back into the game, and it's going to come back with full force. The clock situation and board as well against Firouzja.
The only explanation for this trade that he allowed and is allowing further on is that he did the rook lift, trying to line up the queen and the rook against Magnus's only semi-weakness, which is going to be the b7 pawn once the trades on b4 happen. Pawn takes pawn, rook takes pawn, trying to get to that, but that weakness is easily defendable by Magnus's rook sliding over.
And these moves that you see right now, for example, forcing the knight away, if the knight goes to e6, for example, it's a very natural move because once the pawn on b4 drops, the knight on e6 is naturally attacking the pawn on c5 together with the bishop. So this is playing into Magnus Carlsen's plan. It's making his moves a little bit more natural to make, which is not good when you have less than half the time of your opponent.
Yeah, those two white pawns are about to drop off. He's hoping here, Firouzja, to create some counterplay with his own knights, I guess. The white rook and white queen quite active. Magnus frowning. This is Magnus's longest think of the game so far. He knows that he has the advantage, a draw enough as well. And sometimes that's a situation you don't necessarily want to be in, where you're caught in two minds. Do you press an advantage, or do you just try to shore up the defenses? Magnus, meanwhile, what is the most risk-free move? I think that's what he's asking himself.
And that's the thing, like, Alireza is in a must-win game right now. It's a dead man's draw for him. It's as good as losing. So he needs to, even if he doesn't want to, create these dynamics on the board, even if that means objectively he'll end up in a worse position. He's ready to sacrifice material to get that piece activity, whether it's a knight planted on d6 or the open b line for his rook or queen. Alireza wants a fight, and Magnus ticking down on the clock.
I think almost breathing a sigh of relief that Magnus is taking so long, trying to work out how it's possible to maybe put the result of this game beyond doubt. It's also giving Alireza plenty of time to think. You can see he's not hunching his shoulders quite as much as before. He's been able to use Magnus's time to hopefully calculate some of the moves that he's going to play too. I'm not sure it's enough to get him to play nice and freely, but you have noticed a slight change in his demeanor over the last 30 seconds or so.
Definitely, and there we go. Magnus doesn't play the best move according to the eval bar. Question mark appears, but he's trying to play safety first chess. We cannot blame him for that, and there we go. Alireza knows a rook trade would guide this game closer to a draw. That's not enough, so he has to gamble. He has to speculate here. He keeps the rooks on.
But crucially, he did it instantaneously.
He's going to have to do that for a bunch more moves.
Big tension on the clock and the board. Rook e4, this does allow Magnus to again trade on b4 if he so wants. Magnus, he slows down, he does take. After rook takes pawn, that rook on d8 can slide one step forward and defend that b7 pawn. And still the attack on Alireza's weakness on c5 continues.
Alireza, he played the previous move instantly. He's gone back into the tank here. About 15-20 seconds invested and counting. Problem is that black bishop is so close now to breaking its way back into the game. The black knight coming back, the white knight's so far unable to get in.
You know, if you have to beat Magnus Carlsen, then you need to make the most of every single aspect and element of the game. You have to be up on the clock. You have to play the opening perfectly. Middle game, try to complicate things. End game, technique on point. And so far, the biggest problem in this match for Alireza has been the clock. Because in those final moments, we've seen the blunders happen.
It's beginning to look like the way to beat Alireza in this grand final is to give him choice. Because that is what Magnus Carlsen is using against him right now. I'm going to give you choices where you're trying to calculate when maybe the position and your clock certainly is calling for you to use your intuition a little bit more. Otherwise, you risk making mistakes in another minute. And it seems like 10 times out of 10, Alireza is choosing to hard calculate instead of trusting his intuition, which is odd because his intuition is so good. That's the reason why he is such a beast when his time gets low.
Exactly, Mr. Intuition, and right now Magnus has won a pawn. The black bishop is out. Most importantly, if the white rook goes to the top of the board with a check, the black bishop can drop back and block. That doesn't look super healthy for Magnus, but it's only temporary, and the black bishop is going to save the day. Alireza struggling to find any attacking resources, any follow-up to that check.
And this is concerning, right? You make a move, you give up a pawn, your opponent takes the bait, and then you again go into a tank, make a move that you're not super happy with, and it turns out to be a blunder. Alireza coming in with a double attack, but there are checks that he needs to be careful about.
He's taking massive risk here. There are two checks that are very tempting for Magnus Carlsen. The black rook now able to infiltrate on the first rank. Magnus leaned back. I think he spotted something. The black bishop can maybe even jump in and sacrifice itself. Something similar to what we showed earlier. Alireza smiling. He knows he's blundered. He spotted the refutation. Black has multiple winning moves here.
And Magnus starts with a flashy bishop takes pawn check on the board. And if this is captured, the knight will jump in with a check, forcing white's king to disconnect with the knight on g3. Knight d3 coming in, queen takes, knight coming in. Alireza cannot believe it. He is the master of tactics, but he's the one on the receiving end of this one. Magnus, super sharp today.
He's under 1 minute. He's got only a few seconds left. And look at this, walking forward with his king. He's now down 2 pawns, but this white king is simply not going to survive. The black king, in the meantime, protected by its army. The pawn will block now. And Magnus's queen can even block, and this one is going to be over. Magnus will surely not let Firouzja back off the hook there, and there we go. It's actually checkmate to end this game.
Checkmate on the board, and it started with bishop takes f2. At 3.5 minutes, plays 1. Magnus Carlsen takes the full point, and with that, the first set in this grand final. Advantage, Team Liquid.
Magnus Carlsen is crashing in on the Falcons. He's drowning the competition here. I mean, unbelievable what he's done in set 1. You know, wins in game 1, wins in game 4. The middle 2 games he could have pushed to flag Alireza, doesn't do it. And this was the brilliant move. Bishop takes pawn, the start of the end.
Yeah, beautiful awareness, tactical alertness. Magnus showing off his different gears there. He was in defensive control mode for so long. Suddenly, given an opportunity, he landed a blow, won 2 pawns, and unexpected to Firouzja, unexpected to me here in the commentary booth, he landed a checkmate even to end this game. Ruthless from the world number 1.
So it is 3-1 in set number 1. And that means that Magnus Carlsen takes that home now. We should point out, if Firouzja is able to take set 2, it doesn't matter what the scoreline is. It could be 2.5 a half, it could be 2-all, and he wins on Armageddon. It doesn't matter, they would be 1 set all, okay? So that has got to be the goal for Firouzja right now. He needs to forget about what just happened and focus all of his energy on winning that second set. Let's go ahead and head back to the studio to break it down and see what Alireza has to do to come back.
Thank you so much, Caster. Set 1 is all Magnus Carlsen as he takes down Alireza Firouzja in 3-1 fashion. I'll remind everybody that Alireza joined or entered the day with not a single lost game in this tournament. Magnus, he hands him 2. One of those coming with an actual checkmate on the board, Maurice.
That is rare to see a top player actually hang mate in 1, but he was already busted in that position. And let me tell you, this was pure dominance by Magnus Carlsen. Game 1, clearly him. Game 2, he could have dirty flagged his opponent, and game 3 as well, as he was way up on the clock. He could have just made a bunch of moves, and Alireza would not have been able to keep up. But Magnus, all class, decided, I'm not going to win like that. Let me show you how I'm going to win. I'm going to mate you on the board.
Yeah, it's not over just yet. There's still at least one more best of 4 set coming our way where Alireza can try to equalize. But Ben Feingold, we have got to talk about this Magnus Carlsen. He said yesterday in the post-game interview, I'm readying my bow. I've got more arrows in the quiver, and I'm ready to take down another Falcon. So far, he's living up to that.
Yeah, this is by far the best that Magnus has played in this event. He saved the best for last, which he often does, making my prediction look silly as usual. I guess the ladies were right. And once again, Magnus wins.
It's that game 1. You give Magnus 1 single chance. He takes it 1-0 decisive fashion. But it's that second game for me, Maurice, that it goes exactly to the point you're making. Where Magnus, you can call it cocky, you can call it confident, you can call it classy. Any way you slice it, he is making a statement by not going for the flag against Alireza Firouzja.
I've seen it happen multiple times. I've been doing commentary on Magnus now for over a decade. And you see how sportsmanlike he is. He wants to beat you on the board. He's been known to play a match online and his opponent actually disconnects for some reason, and when the opponent comes back, Magnus tosses the next game, just resigns. So that's not how he wants to win. And so he doesn't want to win here by actually dirty flagging anybody. He's like, you know what? Technically, that's a draw. I'll give it to you. Next game, he could have done the same thing. Technically, it's a draw because I'm just better than you. And that's got to be inside of Alireza's head, because I tell you, if the shoe was on the other foot, Alireza would have very nicely said, hey, we got to play on the clock. It's part of the game. It just shows that Magnus is super confident alongside the fact that he's an ambassador of our sport.
Any other player takes those flags and nobody would have blamed them for it because there's a lot on the line here. But I got to say, Ben, right right now. We have not seen the stonewall on the board, but it kind of feels like Alireza is playing into a stonewall named Magnus Carlsen.
That's right, and you're not talking about the opening called the Stonewall because nobody's playing that here. Magnus showed why he's Magnus, and Alireza has to really amp up his game if he wants to make this a contest.
Okay, talk to me about what that looks like then, amping up his game. It's another best of 4. You've got a little bit of time to rest and retool towards it, but you now have to win this best of 4 to even force the next best of 2. So what do you want to see Alireza do here?
I want to see Alireza play faster in the opening, faster in the middle game, put more pressure on Magnus. He's way behind on the clock in every game. That's not a recipe for success.
Every single person here and every single person around the world wants to see this go the distance, Maurice, but that means we're asking a lot of a young guy in Alireza Firouzja right now who just went down 3-1. What do you want to see?
Well, he has to take a page out of Hikaru Nakamura's book. Forget these solid openings, positional play, nuanced style. That ain't working against Magnus Carlsen. This is what Magnus wants. He plays control chess. What Magnus, if there's any weakness in his illustrious game, is when chaos is on the board. And Hikaru Nakamura showed that. If you can muck it up a little bit, you might have to play an inferior opening line that has tactical chances, but maybe you're at a deficit to start. That's what Hikaru did with the King's Indian. That's what he's going to have to do, Alireza, in order to maybe throw Magnus off kilter, as Magnus loves it when it's just him and we are just driving down the road or strolling through the park and I'm going to kick your ass. That's what's going to happen.
So that's Alireza trying to make the comeback. Let's talk, though, about how Magnus Carlsen closes it out right here with the expectation that Alireza is going to come in with some new strategies, maybe some new creativity or a change of pace. How does Magnus just lock it up here and now?
For Magnus, it's more of the same. Play the same way he did in the first match. He knows he's a better player. He's played better. Magnus doesn't have to change anything. He just has to keep his cool, keep having the advantage on the clock, and hope that Alireza goes too far in trying to muck things up.
You know, and there was one thing I don't like what I'm seeing is how demoralized Alireza looks. Come on, man, bring it.
Come, we called you a favorite for a reason. You got yourself to the grand finals. Let's see you fight the world number 1. Either way, Magnus Carlsen is up 1-0 in our total sets, but Alireza can strike back. Let's go to Mike for a word of what it looks like on the ground here at EWC.
Well, as you just saw, Magnus Carlsen took the first set 3-1. I'm here amongst the crowds. I can see people playing chess on their phones, waiting with their chessboards to get autographs. But the big story is that Magnus Carlsen wanted to win on the board. He did not want to flag his opponent, and I've known the man for about 12 years. He wants the headline to read, I played this cool knight b8 tactic in game 1. I played bishop takes f2 in game 4, and that's how he wants to try to win this match. Also, a little bit of breaking news. As I was headed into the arena, I saw Hikaru Nakamura re-enter the arena with his second, Chris Littlejohn. I asked Hikaru, hey, are you going to Alireza Firouzja's green room? Are you going to help him? Hikaru said to me, I'm going to go help him if he wants me to. So I don't know if Alireza is going to accept the assistance, but Hikaru has rushed back into the arena, and he is available for his teammate for Team Falcons.
That's the picture on...
Welcome back to Chess at the Esports World Cup. We're about to get started with set 2 in the grand final. Currently, it's advantage Magnus Carlsen, the world #1, who took down Alireza Firouzja 3-1 in the first set. But that scoreline no longer matters. As long as Firouzja wins the second set, doesn't matter if it's by a tiniest of margin in Armageddon or an absolute 3-0 blowout. We will equal the scores 1-all. But it is all on Firouzja now. Can he turn this around?
He needs to turn it around. He needs to be better, needs to be quicker. He suffered his first defeat of the whole competition just in this last set, Firouzja, and it was uncharacteristic. Magnus, of course, at his best, hard to beat, but Tanya, you've got to expect more from the youngster.
Absolutely. In set 1, Alireza was outplayed and outpaced. He needs to flip the script. I think there are a lot of takeaways from all the games that we just saw. Some of the big ones for me were that Alireza has to make sure that he pulls Magnus into complicated battles, into those muddy waters, and needs to make sure he does that with a lot of time on the clock. The Falcon has to fly higher. He has to strike faster. You either rise now or it's all over.
And let's be clear as well. I feel like going into this matchup, a lot of people expected Carlsen to maybe get a bit of an edge over the board, but Firouzja to apply time pressure on Carlsen because of how quick he is. In reality, Carlsen has been on the receiving end in a good way of both of those traits. So it felt like Firouzja didn't have much to work with. That needs to change.
It needs to change, and something that has changed is Alireza Firouzja's first move. In the first set, he was playing e4 against Magnus Carlsen. Now, with white starting this set with those white pieces, Firouzja's gone back to something that served him well earlier in the event. He's been playing d4, and a quick capture of a pawn, that black d-pawn not running away anytime soon. And Magnus, look at this. He played h6 last move. He plays h5 now. He's definitely prepared. No chance this would have been mouse slip. No chance this would have been sudden spur-of-the-moment inspiration. This is Magnus Carlsen going for Firouzja's king.
Very early on. The king coming for his opponent's king in this one, making his intentions clear. He's not thinking about development right now, but at some point, Magnus needs to get his pieces out. If he has to attack successfully in this game, h5 forces Alireza to go into a tank, and that's a small victory for Magnus already. He's seen that work out to his favor. He knows that Alireza in that break between set 1 and set 2 had prepared the queen's pawn opening, and this is where he counter-surprises him.
This is actually very, very impressive to start us off. Like you said, Tanya, queen's pawn opening, okay, we're switching it up for set 2, and instantaneously, Carlsen sends Alireza thinking very, very early on. He's now got a 30-second lead, but that's not the point. This was supposed to be a surprise that got Firouzja extra time on the clock. That hasn't happened, at least not yet.
Not yet. Magnus there reacting to a question mark move by returning the pawn that he was up. Yes, he could have gone a pawn up, Magnus, by trading, but that would have accelerated the opponent's development. Instead, he's happy to kind of transpose from what looked like it was about to be a fiery position with the black h-pawn going forward. Instead, he's playing more positionally here. Almost symmetrical in the center. Magnus, clearly the better prepared of these two players.
So what's the plan B now for Firouzja? Suddenly he's worried about, well, maybe not right now, but he's worried about h4. He's worried about the kingside pawn storm, trying to figure out what Magnus's plan is. He doesn't want to spend too long doing it, though. So what is he doing in the meantime? How are we going to be improving the pieces? Is there a plan B?
It's a really tough question to answer, and I think Alireza struggles with it as well, as he continues to think, Magnus, especially when is prepared in this line.
Right.
My guess would be that coming into this match, Magnus had certain ideas for the king's pawn opening, and he'd also seen the queen's pawn opening. And this is something that was part of his repertoire for this grand final. And Firouzja is very aware of that, because h5 cannot be over-the-board inspiration. This is a move you've seen at home.
I think I've seen it actually published in some magazines, some books, maybe some other resources, this funny idea of the black h-pawn moving twice, as if he forgot, Magnus, for a moment, that pawns can move 2 squares on their first go. Ultimately, Firouzja. He's repeated a mistake that a lot of us make. He's played the same opening multiple times in the same tournament, and Magnus, of course, he will have studied what Firouzja's been doing on previous days. And ultimately, it's just a level position, but that's a success for whoever starts with black.
And you know, moves like this, after playing h6, you go h5, it's sort of like a one trick pony. You use it for one game because you know that your colleagues, your competition will be preparing it for the next one, and it's not objectively the best move. So Magnus choosing this stage where Alireza has got no increment, no bonus time, a very practical play by the world number one.
And also, don't forget, you move h6 and then h5, the casual observer will rightly go, well, hang on a second. You're just giving away a tempo. But the point is, all of your opening preparation, all of the positions your opponent has memorized, all of the plans that they're thinking about, even though that tempo is to their advantage, you're now having to recalculate all of that a move out. And it's super frustrating to have to do that, not just for one line, but for all of your opening preparation.
And in the meantime, a question mark move appears, but I just want to backtrack and show for some eagle-eye viewers what might have happened if White tried to go a pawn up. He could have played bishop takes knight, Alireza, and we would have seen a recapture. White could have captured this h5 pawn that we've been talking so much about, but here the black g pawn pushes forward, pawn to g5, hitting the white knight. If you retreat, now you can trap the white queen. The bishop comes out, and when the queen retreats, you go back to f5. Look at this, embarrassed queen coming out too early. This is why they say, don't bring those pieces out too soon. So this variation, quickly calculated by both players, quickly avoided by Alireza Firouzja, and that leaves us with a very level-looking middle game. Again, everything he wants to try, Alireza, all these sharp lines seem to be working in Magnus's favor. And just to point out, the move that he gained by Magnus pushing h6, then h5, is a pawn push to b3. And actually, that pawn on b3 gets in the way of the white queen and loosens the dark squares. That is why Magnus's strategy has been so effective.
That's such a key point, because the extra move that you have is actually not only one that doesn't give you any advantages, but might have actually given your opponent something to play for. And this is sort of the hard part in chess, right? When you know your opponent in the opening has wasted a move, how do you play something that long run works in your favor? And it looks like this time, Alireza did not find the right way.
You give yourself that sort of pressure, don't you? Because psychologically you think, well, there is no way this is the best move, h6 then h5. I feel like it's my duty here to punish that, to show you why that's inaccurate, to show you why that leads to an advantage for me. And it just adds additional pressure to make that right move. And if you're unable to do that, then what looked like a silly move suddenly looks pretty sensible.
I want to point out one more thing, speaking about the dynamics, as you pointed out, John, in this position, White would love to play h4 and stop that black pawn from moving forward. But the bishop complexes are such that black's the one who can take advantage of the light square weakness that would be the g4 point. But meanwhile, White does not have the dark squared bishop. So after h4, you don't have a bishop to plonk on g5.
Right.
But the g4 square beautifully there for Magnus would have been left behind. So now, basically, for the rest of the game, or at least until White plays h4, Magnus is always threatening to push that pawn even further ahead.
I just want to point out as well, look at the clock. Nothing has changed in terms of time usage from the first set. Firouzja down 2.5 minutes. Might not sound like much, but we've been here before. We've seen what happened.
This is dangerous now. Firouzja maybe thought, rather than change the time management, let's change the opening and see if that leads as a natural consequence to the time management being a little bit easier, to the inequality being a little bit less. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's the case. He started with the queen's pawn opening, and the situation on the clock is now starting to get as bad as it was in set number 1. So he is trying something different. Let's give him credit where it's due, but so far at least, doesn't seem to be working.
Yeah, we've been talking about tennis, how the kind of format of the finals, it's in sets. Having white is like having the serve in tennis. That's what they used to say. You can choose to go e-pawn, d-pawn. Ultimately, though, your opponent is expecting you to mix up those serves occasionally, to go different directions, and he chose to serve with a different hand. He went d4 this time, but Magnus was waiting. Magnus was ready. And now, okay, it's all about the c-file, but it looks solid enough for black.
But so far, speaking of tennis, I mean, the play from Alireza throughout the match feels like it's from baseline. He needs to somewhere come and do those volleys if he's got to have a chance against Magnus. But this position, I don't even see a way for a break to appear on the board.
No break. If anything, it's going to be all rooks off on the c-file. And Firouzja's done nothing wrong in terms of kind of objective moves. It's probably just an equal position, but that's not what he wants with the white pieces.
And speaking of breaks, if anyone's got that, it's got to be Magnus, right? The e5 pawn moving forward at some point, the h pawn moving ahead at some point. So Magnus also holding the keys to opening up this position.
Agreed. All the options seem to be favoring white here. Not necessarily meaning that they, lead to victory instantaneously or anything like that, but certainly the options in terms of what strategic direction the game is going to go in. The initiative very firmly in Magnus's favor for now. And that's not a problem if there was time on the clock. The problem is Firouzja is 3 minutes down as well. 7 versus 4, you know what? Totally fine. But if this gets into another 4 versus 1 scenario, that can very quickly become a blunder.
3.5 minutes. It's not a blunder from Firouzja, but I'm going to say a small miss from him. He underestimated Magnus's knight going to the edge of the board here. I'm really surprised he didn't just bring the other white rook to the c-file. Now there's going to be tension, and look at this. He's forced to retreat due to the tension. The white knight was pinned, and after this trade, black is going to be the one conquering the open lines. Look at this. The white knight hit Firouzja. He's reeling, retreating, forced to react to these threats. Magnus is on fire, I've got to say.
He really is. I mean, it's just incredible what he's done in this match so far. He's not only dominating on the board, he's winning the psychological warfare here against Alireza. Just the way he played that set 1. The 2 times, Alireza is very aware that Magnus could have even tried to flag him in those 2 games that eventually ended in a draw. Magnus didn't even want to do that. He finished the set with a checkmate on the board.
This looks slow and steady and inevitable coming in from Magnus. The queen and the rook battery on the C line. There's not very much at all. In fact, there's pretty much nothing Alireza can do to prevent infiltration from the queen on the next move, if that's what Magnus wants. And what's frustrating is Magnus has done this on a fraction of the time that Alireza has taken, and that's really what hurts the most, because speed was supposed to be Alireza's greatest weapon.
We're 24 moves in. Magnus has not spent more than 21 seconds on a single move. Alireza, meanwhile, it's about half a dozen moves he's spent around the 1 minute mark. And okay, he's kicked the black knight back, but that's not going to help at all. White knight sidelined. The pace of this game, the black queen coming in soon, it all spells danger.
This has been so strange. Just the positions that we've gotten in the match so far, Alireza really never get going. In any of the boards, in any of the games that we've seen, not getting his kind of play, not getting his kind of positions where he really, really excels at. Hikaru managed to do that. Again, from the back foot. When he played that King's Indian defense, he just went all out. Somehow, Alireza hasn't been able to get that on the board for himself.
And that looked similar to what Magnus is doing in this game, because Hikaru was able to engineer a situation where he built a small advantage and kept building on it and kept building on it and shut down Magnus's counterplay. And you could tell in that game yesterday, Magnus was very uncomfortable when that situation happened. We need Firouzja to be able to engineer the same thing, but he hasn't been able to.
Look at this, another question mark move appears. The bar slides, saying that Magnus has an over 3-point advantage. That's because Alireza's moved up a pawn, weakening his king. It might be time for the black queen to swoop in. So many targets in mind there. The black rook as well. Hopefully, he would be hoping that it lands on c4. The black bishop there on d3 instead, hitting a white rook. Not the best from Magnus, but good enough to maintain the advantage. I think he's going for the queen trade here, Tanya. He's going to be hoping that he can pick off the white b-pawn in the near future. The only thing Magnus has to be careful of is counter play here from queen to e7 incoming.
And that would combine the queen and the knight attack on the f7 pawn. So definitely something that you want to think about. The bar says Magnus is doing great, but you see a move like queen e7 as your opponent's threat. And you start thinking about, maybe I need to be a little careful, need to go on the defense here. But the good news for Magnus is, even if that was to happen, the bishop can always slide back. Go back to g6 and keep everything protected. So Magnus, will he try the queen trade? He doesn't. He does, in fact, go on that defense, making sure that Alireza does not get queen e7. The knight retreats, the queen defends.
A bit odd, actually, Magnus's bishop move, allowing this white knight to jump back with gain of time. And here, Alireza at least has corrected one of his bad pieces to some extent, but still hard to find a plan for white. If you push any further pawns on the king side, you're only weakening yourself. You're not ready. And it does feel like Magnus, he's clearly playing on the clock. He's not even trying to come in and create any complications. He's just biding his time.
White would love to be able to get the knight out to d3 so that you can slide the rook across to c1 and actually create some sort of opposition on the c file. Can't do that because of the bishop on g6, unfortunately, and as a result, not only is the position a little bit binding, but the most obvious idea is also being bound. So we're being forced to think of alternatives now. The bishop comes in thinking about coming into d3 to try and get that plan in motion, but black immediately slides in with the queen to c2, not allowing enough time.
And he's also threatening his own rook to swoop onto that c3 square with further ideas and tactics of attacking the knight, which has just moved back to that square. Magnus's queen looking beautiful, the rook on the open line. Just compare Magnus's pieces to Alireza's forces here. You know, all of them, most of them on the first rank, the other two left on the board are on different sides of the board. Not combining, no play to be found. Magnus has basically denied Alireza any activity in this entire match. You know, David, you said Magnus on fire. It's usually Firouzja, and that's not been the case. Liquid Carlsen's extinguished all flames in this one.
I mean, he absolutely loves Alireza, that is. These big, dynamic positions where there's lots and lots of attacking, but Magnus is just shutting him down so hard at every opportunity that he hasn't got the opportunity, really, to give us that flair that we know he's capable of, and he's struggling in those conditions.
Yeah, there's something up with Alireza's clock handling as well. Maybe it's due to the type of position, maybe it's just due to the opponent, and there we go, Magnus making his move. G5 looks super aggressive. It's actually designed to just paralyze, immobilize the white knight on the edge of the board. We're down to bullet territory, 40 seconds. The red appearing for Alireza Firouzja. He needs to move. This game is still in its infancy. This is still the early middle game. He's trying to blow open the center now. He's got to change the pace, Alireza, but barring a blunder, surely not enough time.
And that's the thing. When you change the pace, you need more time on the clock to handle all those critical decisions that come out of that gear shift. But Alireza now 36 seconds on the clock. Bullet territory, you know, synonym for that is Alireza Firouzja. But he's so slow on every single move.
And Magnus has blundered. Magnus has not realized that the white rook can step up one square, kicking the black queen away from the defense of its knight. Magnus, we're going to see a reaction from him. He's going to have to switch gears and try to flag. He's just lost a piece.
Whoa. Magnus Carlsen, will he go on to flagging mode now? That one big inaccuracy. We've seen him not play on the clock earlier in this match. Is this when it all changes?
Wow, carelessness from the world number one. He knew that he was getting closer and closer to his goal of claiming the first game of this set too, but now the black queen, kicked away off the diagonal, will not be able to defend its knight. The tactics go on. Magnus is going to have to calculate his way out of this.
And it's pretty complex, right? Because black has the option of pinning that bishop on the first rank, trying to target the other knight at the edge of the board. Magnus, he's gone in to find that resource mode right now. There are still tactics that exist, but Magnus, is he finding them?
That is a huge shift. Magnus now, he's going to have to show us something that he hasn't been reluctant to do so far in this match. He has to flag Firouzja. He's going to have to try and create some tricks here, Magnus.
It's Alireza with 24 seconds, but it's Magnus Carlsen who's panicking right now.
Oh, look at Magnus's face. He is shocked. He's given up his queen, the world number one. Here we go. It's rook and knight for a queen. Alireza Firouzja is winning, but does he have enough time on the clock? This is the best position he's had all match, all day. The black king's so open as well. It's a race against the clock, 21 seconds. Can he convert?
That is the big question. Will it be enough time? He needs to combine that queen and bishop first. He completely disconnects black's rook, and Alireza with a shake of his head, just wishing he had that extra minute on the clock.
Magnus Carlsen is busted. The black rook is about to be hit. The white queen is coming in. There we go. Black's pieces can barely move. The queenside pawns are gone, but 16 seconds. Magnus is going to have to be dirty about this.
Alireza has to win this. He has to convert this game at all costs right now. 16 seconds. This is where his bullet skills need to come in. Magnus trying to survive.
Black rook can barely move. There we go. The first pawn drops. The black rook coming in with a check. Some counterplay, some hope for Magnus Carlsen, but Firouzja's done everything right. He has activated God mode, Alireza Firouzja. He's pushing the B pawn forward for glory. It's creating counterplay for Magnus Carlsen in the meantime. 11 seconds, Tanya. Is it going to be enough?
That is the big question. Alireza Firouzja can get maximum number of moves when he's down on the seconds, better than anyone else in the world, and that's what he needs to do right now. Will he convert into a full point? He gives it up. Another queen appears on the board.
And Magnus blunders his rook.
He's about to resign.
Wow. Alireza Firouzja striking back. He's got two queens. 7 seconds should be more than enough. Magnus Carlsen gives up. What a turnaround.
An opening surprise and counter surprise not working out for Firouzja, leading to 5 minutes versus 1, but getting into a winning position with 20 seconds left on his clock and managing to convert against the world #1. We have fireworks and a couple of moments of magic here from Alireza Firouzja. Falcons are back on the board.
And we have a match on our hands with that big win. Alireza Firouzja, what a roller coaster of a game. And you could see it on Magnus Carlsen. He was furious with himself. This was his game. Alireza down to 25 seconds when Magnus made that blunder. But what a convert there by the Falcons.
Magnus said it before the match himself. Nerves, they're going to play a part. That was Magnus Carlsen reluctant to get involved in a time scramble and showing why Firouzja there. He was just so fast, so accurate. You never really doubted Firouzja once he got that winning advantage, despite the clock time. Super impressive, so resourceful. And there we see the final blunder from Magnus, dropping his rook and the reaction on his face.
Unbelievable stuff. Firouzja only getting to the winning position with 24 seconds left to go. And you know what? This is the kind of magic that we know Firouzja is capable of. Maybe Magnus and Hikaru, the only two players on the planet, arguably, who can do that quite as fast with that sort of precision. I will say, though, it did require an opening from Magnus. It required that mistake for Firouzja to capitalize on it. Had Magnus not blundered that piece to begin with, we might be staring down the barrel of a very different result right now. In fact, that would have been quite likely.
It came down to that one move blunder, but how quick, how fast, how Alireza sharp was Firouzja in that moment to capitalize on it and never gave Magnus a chance to come back into the game. This is what he does best. With seconds on the clock, he still has the tactical ability of God.
That's what Alireza was saying before the match started as well. It's going to be tough. Magnus will give you very few chances. It is critical that when those chances come by, you have to instantly take them. And this might be the first time we saw him definitively grab one of those with both hands.
Forget Falcon, he's going to feel like a phoenix right now, the way he rose from the ashes in that game, Alireza. Still a shake of the head, but he knows he's back with a vengeance. Game on.
And this is the confidence you need, right? When you're playing against Magnus, everything that happened in set 1 is now behind Alireza Firouzja. With that big win, this is going to be some match now. He's got to be feeling good about his chances, but he needs to keep up the pace on the clock. Because had it not been for that one move blunder, this would have been a completely different storyline.
Now Magnus reacts to that shock, to that disappointment by playing a very ambitious opening. Magnus with white has played into one of the main lines of the semi-Slav defense. White has Fianchettoed his bishop, but it's a gambit. The gambit accepted by Alireza Firouzja, who's captured on c4 and hopes to maintain that pawn phalanx there. He's up a pawn, he develops his bishop. Magnus needs to play very energetically to compensate.
But I like this because these are the kind of positions that get super complicated in the middle game, you know, where black does have the extra pawn and white plays for a big center, for piece activity and domination of trying to make sure that Alireza's pieces do not get into development. This last move makes Alireza push the B pawn and the C pawn as well moving forward. Looks extremely strong, but the base of that chain will be targeted by Magnus with A3.
This is such high-risk strategy from Magnus Carlsen. High reward as well, since black isn't fully developed. But if he cannot strike in the next few moves, Magnus, he's going to regret allowing black this beautiful protected passed pawn formation. Alireza, he smells weakness and he's going for it here.
It's very rare that we see a pass pawn on the third rank for black this early on in a game. Obviously, we're still quite early on here, and I'm sure positions like this have been studied a fair bit before. We're very much in the opening, but that's got to be really uncomfortable.
Especially after what just happened, you know, and Magnus does not want to take this to a third set.
No.
He wants to get this done this time, but for that, he needs to find a chance to get a win in. Only 3 more games remain for Alireza to neutralize this match, to equalize the match and force that tiebreaker set. And what he's done so far, you know, it shows that he doesn't want to play KG anymore. The confidence he needed, it's in the bag.
That's interesting as well, isn't it? Because with the confidence there, it's a weird situation where 3 draws actually gets Alireza the second set, but I don't think anybody here or on the analyst desk or in the audience or anywhere are betting that Alireza wants to play safe and get 3 safe draws. That is not going to happen, right? That's just not his brand of chess. It's not where he excels, and he wants to show us more of what just got him that victory in game number 1.
Exactly. He has fully woken up Alireza, and I love this change in strategy from him. Rather than just try to defend stoically, solidly as black and allow Magnus to try and grind him down, he's gone for one of the most ambitious variations you can play against these queen's pawn openings. Magnus now pausing. It feels like both players are freestyling somewhat, just judging by the clock. This is the first time Alireza's been up on time at the 12 move mark in any game so far. That must be fantastic news for him.
Absolutely. And Alireza, he still has an extra pawn on the board, and that's a big pawn on c3. So for Magnus, he has to find a way to prove this opening idea that he went with. It's still a long way to go. The play often revolves around the squares the white knights have, the b6 point, the c5 point. At some moment, Magnus might try to win a bishop pair in the position to prove that compensation, and that bishop on g2 make sure that the knight on b8 does not come out in the game, at least for some time.
Alireza pausing. To recapture with the pawn is maybe high risk, but it's also very, very high reward in this scenario. To take back with your bishop would get you closer to castling, but your passed pawn on c3 will probably drop in the near future. So I'm expecting this move is at least the move he wants to play from Firouzja.
It's also his style. But the fact that he's slowed down, you know, this is what we've been seeing this whole match, just his time management. It almost feels a player whose biggest forte is his intuition, his instincts. Somehow he's not being able to trust them. Exactly. Pawn takes pawn is what Alireza plays every single day. Whoa, he goes for another approach, gives up the bishop by himself.
Wow, maybe he's scared of any pins on the A file. He wanted to open up the black rook. The last move given an exclamation point, but the eval bar rises in Magnus's favor. It did feel a bit rushed. Normally you don't want to clarify the structure, especially giving white some nice central control here until the last minute. But there we go. And he's allowed Magnus forward.
And I love that move. Not only does it get the knight to b6 in positions, but it blocks the black bishop on f8. And now the white queen about to threaten that pawn on b4 via queen to b3. And that would be big trouble for black.
And we have to pull up a board here because Alireza Firouzja is going to spend a bit of time thinking, but he might have to find a genius move here to hold the balance. In this position, given a bit of time, whites are going to bring the queen out and we see the bar rise. The queen's coming to b3 to pick off some pawns, but Alireza could have played bishop takes c5.
Wow.
The white knight is pinned, cannot recapture, and if the pawn takes back, then the queens would disappear from the board. And at the very end of the variation, b3, look at the pin on the A file, look at the menacing pawns. This would provide full compensation to black, but wow, not spotted. We can't blame him for that. Superhuman that would have been, but now he might be finding himself in trouble instead. If the black pawns drop off on the queen side, Tanya, it's a huge advantage for Magnus Carlsen.
This is a beautiful position. If you're not defending that b4 pawn, and let's point out, the knight can't jump to a6 because guess what? That beautiful, stunning bishop on g2, the Catalan bishop, the Queen's Gambit declined bishop, call it what you want, is eyeing that c6 pawn. It's the most valuable piece here for Magnus. You can't let it activate there. If not knight a6, the only other move is queen to a5. But that also comes under fire once white moves the bishop away, the knight jumps forward. What is your queen even doing on a5? I don't think there's a way to defend this pawn.
Yeah, you could grab white's pawn in the center, I guess, but the black queen will be kicked around the board, and that doesn't feel healthy, especially with the black king still marooned in the center. No happy decisions here for Alireza. He's not a pawn grabber by nature. He won't want to get his queen out and lose more time there before getting castled, but he might have to. That's the only way.
Console yourself by saying actually grabbing that pawn undermines part of what is making white's position so strong at the moment, and rather than seeing it as pawn grabbing, you have to see it as something positionally to build on, right?
Another big moment for Alireza. Is he going to take the pawn? He does, and now we're expecting Magnus to bring out his bishop to attack the black queen. The black queen will want to retreat, and now after taking back the pawn, watch out, the white queen coming into b7 as well as the black pawn on c3 dropping off. Black cannot even castle, or maybe he can, because the queen to b7 looks like a double attack, and this is looking into the future, but we're headed in this direction, at least until this last move from Firouzja. It's hotting up this game now. Magnus senses his moment.
Queen to g4, and is White going to continue chasing that queen away, which defends that b4 pawn? Magnus, if he wins b4, he's not going to stop there. There's queen b7, the c3 pawn falls as well. And if you're able to neutralize the material deficit in the position as White with the two bishops, the bishop on g2 unchallenged for the rest of the game, it's advantage Carlsen.
Absolutely. I mean, look, that was the point that was made out of the opening here by Firouzja. I've got these monstrous pawns that are passed now on b4 and c3, and that's going to be how I force you to give up an advantage so that you can mop up those pawns. I need something in exchange for that. And right now, though, it feels like it's Carlsen who's batting him around a bit and will get to pick them up. If he's able to do that for free, and don't forget, Firouzja still has to castle. This is very much looking like initiative firmly lost by the black pieces.
Yeah, just to point out, the black queen could not have taken a pawn on e2, as the white knight would have jumped back, taking a pawn, hitting the queen, and opening up a line towards the black rook. So there was a poisoned pawn in that position, and Magnus, talking of pawns, goes munching. First of black's pawns drops. Now he has to castle Firouzja. Unthinkable to do anything else. The black king needed to run to safety before it was too late. And can Magnus do more than just regain the material he gave up earlier?
Well, the one idea is the double attack that we earlier pointed out, queen to b7, but there is a defensive resource there. The black knight coming to d7, connecting the two rooks, and also making sure queen takes bishop isn't possible, and that's why maybe it does not work just in time there. So Magnus, with a lot of choices here, he could take the pawn back on c3, he could infiltrate with his own queen, or will he find some activity against black's offside queen on the right side of the board? He does take the pawn back, inviting a trade of rooks. Rook takes rook, on Magnus's turn, will give him the a-file.
It's the first time in 15 moves that we've got level material again. It's crazy, these sacrifices, such long-term ideas by these top players. And ultimately, Magnus emerges with a very small advantage.
Yeah, to be fair, when you compare the pieces, you go, well, actually, now that Firouzja's played knight bd7, the knights are on reasonable squares. The bishop is at least pointing towards a c5 pawn, which is a bit of a menace, but it's doing something useful. You can see the knight potentially coming into d5, but take a look at the bishop here from Magnus. The piece activity just feels a little bit stronger for white, and it feels like white has some more options. Not necessarily a winning position or anything like that, but it feels easier to play.
Easier to play, and Alireza pauses before moving the rook in the corner that's attacked. Does ultimately shift it and attack the white queen. Magnus is going to run away with that piece now, but the big question is whether black can take the c5 pawn next. If he restores the material balance, makes sure that it's only pawns on one flank, then Firouzja should be out of danger.
Well, there's also another pawn hanging on the board, the h3 one. Let's not forget about that. He's threatening c5, queen takes pawn as well, with some ideas of the knight jumping forward, maybe putting some pressure on Magnus's king. With this move, rook b8, first asking a question to Magnus's queen, where does he run?
Big moment, and I'm looking at the clock, I'm thinking this again is the best situation Firouzja's been in a while, and Magnus looks frustrated.
I think that's a great point. We're past move 20 now. I feel like so far in this match, there have been several instances where Firouzja's been down by 2 or 3 minutes on the clock by this point. That has not happened in this game. He hasn't got time to take solace from that at the moment, but we can see that this is a visible improvement from Alireza.
This is a completely shift in pace, you know, on the board, psychologically, on the clock, everything. This is a totally different match, a totally different set from what we saw earlier on in the day. And now Alireza about to get more time on the clock than Magnus for the first time in this match, as Magnus dips below the 423 mark, still hasn't made a decision of where to move the queen, 2 pawns under attack. Alireza, I think he's ambitious about his chances. Magnus moves the queen to f4. Be careful, the black knight can't take on c5, the rook on b8 is hanging.
Yep, great move by Magnus, maintaining some advantage due to the fact the black rook is so loose. But Firouzja now, at least he has a little bit of time, a few seconds, to mull over what to do. The move he wants to play is bishop takes pawn on c5, but some calculation needed. The black queen holding things together there might get hit. And Firouzja, big moment. He can't spend too long though.
Yeah, I'm trying to... Can he get away with bishop takes? It looks like he just about can, because maybe because the black queen is actually still on h5. It's easy to forget that it's still on the board, and it's a bit of a long-range piece there. So maybe that just about allows it to happen. But you're right, you can't take it with the knight. It has to be with the bishop.
Gonna point out, Magnus blundered a rook in the last game.
Oh my God.
Like you guys said, with the queen on h5, that's going to be the recapture after bishop takes pawn. So possible, but something about that move Magnus does not like. He's perhaps also thinking about queen capturing the pawn on h3, the other one that's available, or maybe a rook slide over, hitting that bishop. A lot of options, but he's taking his time, Alireza is.
Yeah, you mentioned Magnus blundering a rook. He's done that a few times in recent history. He regularly blunders knights, I'm going to say. He blundered a knight against Hikaru in the final game, game 6 of their semi-finals. He blundered a knight against Firouzja in the previous encounter. It's always these knights on e4, knights on d2. It's always the same pattern that Magnus seems to have a blind spot. I'll just mention that here. Luckily, he's white, and luckily for him at least, he's white. And his knight, for now, not under threat, but just watch out for that later. Firouzja has found some weakness, but this move, he spent nearly 2 minutes now, nearly half his time on this one turn. He does take the pawn.
Well calculated.
But
Good
this
that
is-
he worked that out, but so much time spent.
That's exactly the point. It felt like a 2 to 3 move calculation, right? So Alireza would have thought deeper. He didn't spend 2 minutes just figuring out that he's got queen takes bishop at the end of that line. There's something more to this position. He's trying to think, because every piece is loose right now. That knight on d7 defends the rook on d8. It can come under fire immediately with the move rook to d1.
And that sets a nasty trap. If the white rook does shift across to d1, black cannot play bishop takes bishop, as the white queen would be sacrificing itself on the b8 square just to break through onto the back rank with some checkmates. I don't know if Magnus Carlsen has spotted that. He's looking a bit deeper into the position, but let's check it out. The best move, rook to d1, attacking the black knight, undermining the bishop. Alireza Firouzja cannot play bishop takes bishop right now, because queen takes rook would end in a checkmate after the queen is recaptured. Look at this, a back ranker. The black king trapped behind its own pawns. Alireza Firouzja cannot trade bishops right now. It's a key moment. He needs to find another solution, but he's down to 2 minutes. He does block the queen's path. That was the only way to survive.
So tricky there by Magnus, setting up that big trap. Because if you're black, you really want to liquidate pieces here. You want to get those trades in, but not giving him the chance. e5 hitting the queen. Magnus with an inaccuracy there. Queen's off the board. And now Alireza can trade on e3, destroying Magnus' pawn formation.
Yeah, and this should be a drawn endgame. It's going to be bishop takes bishop. White's going to take the knight, the black knight. But rook and knight versus rook and bishop. Pawns are only on one flank of the board, only on one side. Knights are better than bishops. Firouzja is going to have to sit and suffer there for a long time. Only white can win. Magnus is now, I think, going to activate hustle mode. He's been reluctant to do it on the clock, but here we go. Can Firouzja hold what is a slightly unpleasant endgame?
I think he does it. He knows what's on the line right now. And, you know, at the end of it, if he holds this position with black, that is a massive, massive thing for him. I mean, it's almost like a slight victory here. He gets white in the next turn. Alireza, he pushes the g-pawn, tying down black's king side. 3 pawns there. Bishop moves backwards. The knight's about to move forward. He first brings the king into the game.
Magnus grabbing space there with that pawn move to g5 to begin with, and he's going to start grinding, gets the pestle and mortar out. We've seen Magnus do this time and time and time again, but will he be able to convert something against what appears to be a little bit of a rejuvenated Firouzja? We've seen him pull out some unbelievable magic tricks in the last game, showing us some of his fantastic skill. We've also seen flashes of him breaking out of, shall we say, the time-draining funk that he's been in, but there were still flashes of that where he did use a minute or two in the late middle game. But he is getting better at it, and you can feel the confidence starting to grow.
There we go, it's bullet time. The clock turns red for Firouzja. He needs to act quick. The white king is stepping up the board. This is what Magnus Carlsen calls anti-young player chess. He's killed the chance of white losing this game now. It's a race against the clock. Firouzja can't clarify the board though. He has no active plans as white steps forward.
And that's because of that 1 pawn on g5. It clamps down on those 3 pawns on f7, g7, h7. Any move by either of these pawns would lend black a huge weakness to deal with. Magnus, meanwhile, can jump around the board with his knight, now about to target the e5 pawn, defended by the bishop, but the knight comes further into the game, hitting the rook and the black f7 pawn, knight d6 in the air.
Knight is coming in. The white rook lands on the 7th rank first, followed by its knight. Black is in full defensive mode. All backs to the wall here. Firouzja needs to break out. He's got 40 seconds. You cannot sit still and do nothing anymore. Magnus will just bide time and go for you. And there we go, he does trade pawns. Here he needs to start trading rooks. Firouzja, he needs to get everything off the board within his last 30 seconds. We're going to see another race against the clock, but a totally different scenario this time, when it's going to be difficult to force Magnus Carlsen to blunder.
And this time, Magnus is going for Firouzja's clock. He's down in this set. He has to maximize his chances. He's not going to shy away from flagging him anymore in this match.
Magnus needs to make some quick moves. He has a 2-minute time advantage. It's going to be so difficult for Firouzja here. The Black Rook was almost trapped, creating some luft there, some escape squares. Black King shuffling. Magnus is pushing pawns. Black Rook forced back. Still so unpleasant here, Tanya. The White Knight dominates the Bishop.
And no more pawns can be traded. And look at that, Magnus Carlsen, he wins a pawn, the first big advantage. He's converted his strategic points into a material advantage.
There we go, Firouzja creating some counterplay, hitting the White Knight, which has to be defended now by the King or the Rook. One pawn up, but it's not about the clock, about the pawns here, it's about the clock. Keep an eye on the red on your screens. Alireza Firouzja needs that fire, needs the speed.
He does, but will that even be enough with 11 seconds? And Magnus just playing this on endlessly, gives a check, drives the Black King away. Magnus Carlsen winning now. He's trapped the Bishop, and Alireza knows he resigns. Magnus Carlsen back in set 2.
Resignation, there we go, with 8 seconds left to go. The speed was incredible. The number of moves that were played in the last 30 seconds of that game, formidable, but not enough to stop the tide that is world #1, Magnus Carlsen. He fights back, and set 2 is now level at 1 apiece.
Firouzja woke up in this second half of the previous game, but he also poked the bear. He woke up his opponent, Magnus Carlsen, who did activate hustle mode, went into what looked like a level endgame, but that proved knights are better than bishops when it's just pawns on one side of the board. Fantastic endgame technique from the best endgame player of all time, but heartbreak for Firouzja, who has to do it all over again.
In this case, he poked the goat, is what I'm going to say. With this endgame play that he has, this is why Magnus Carlsen, just so incredibly good, finds those little opportunities, trapping Firouzja's Bishop there at the edge of the board, dominating by his center knight there. And Magnus Carlsen now at 1-1. It's match on. Firouzja needs to do it all over again.
Set 2 here, Magnus Carlsen up 1-0, and the second set is all square at 1-all. We'll be back here in just a moment with game number 3. Don't go anywhere.
Reach your impossible. Lenovo Legion.
We're here in Riyadh, SNB Sports. We're watching Magnus.
Hello to my children back in the Philippines. Hello. Hello everyone. We are here in Riyadh.
Hello Tyler, you are so short. Hi mom and baba, I made it. Hello everyone, hello my mom, my dad, Sultan. Abdulaziz, Shalan, you keep hanging your queen, don't hang your queen.
Hi mom, hi dad, hi from Riyadh.
Hello everyone, hello, here for Magnus.
Here for Magnus.
Let's go, chess.com. Magnus all the way. Hi everyone.
Hello. Here's the biggest fan of Magnus Carlsen.
Adam.
Oh, so I am the biggest fan of Magnus Carlsen.
I am the biggest fan of Magnus Carlsen.
Who do you support?
Magnus بيفوز إن شاء الله. Magnus is gonna win 100%.
Trying to slide.
It's all square in the second set here in the grand finals of chess at the Esports World Cup. Firouzja came out swinging and with 24 seconds left on his clock, managed to convert a winning position in game number one. The world number one, though, does not rest on his laurels pretty much ever, because he immediately struck back with a victory, leading to a 1-all tie with 2 games remaining in this set.
And Carlsen keeping the speed, keeping the clock advantage, a massive part of his match strategy so far. It's paid off. Barring one blunder at the beginning of set 2, Carlsen has been in great form. Firouzja, though, it's level terms. He needs to forget set 1. He needs to forget that last game where he ended up losing on board and clock. And he knows he still has time to strike.
Controversial opinion, David. He needs to not forget that last game. He needs to not forget set one, because he keeps getting into these positions where he is so under time pressure. He can't afford for that to happen indefinitely. He tried the opening switch up. It worked to an extent. He was doing very well in that last game until maybe move 25 or so. So he's taken some steps in the right direction, but we need more.
Another controversial opinion. The one game that Alireza won was Magnus's to give away. That was a one-move blunder that happened. Even in that one, Alireza really down on the clock. He finished it flawlessly. You know, regardless of that, it was incredible to watch the speed and the precision that he brought onto that one. But again, it came down to that one-move blunder. Turn the flip around. Every game that Magnus has won or has drawn, he has been on that driver's seat. He's been on the front foot, putting the pressure from the start until the end.
That is true. And taking inspiration from previous games is a key trait for any chess player. You need to learn from your mistakes. I'm going to say it's that move 20 to 30, move 20 to maybe even 35 period where he tanks too much. He needs to trust his instincts there. Even if it is chaos, even if he is worse, Alireza Firouzja has shown he can fight back when it becomes tactical. So he just needs to start from a level footing against Magnus.
But I like this opening that we've got because it has the makings of something tactical in the middle game. And that's what Alireza needs to do. You know, get his kind of positions. Yep. Pull Magnus into those muddy waters, into those complications where it becomes difficult to respond, especially if the clock goes low. Now, Alireza, he first starts on the left side, then improves his piece on the right side. I'm also expecting him to play in the center with e4 coming soon enough.
Meanwhile, Magnus Carlsen with black, he's not willing to rest on his laurels and just kind of consolidate after winning the previous game. This is very ambitious from both sides. White has a slightly further advanced pawn on d5, but black has the connect 4 with a beautiful pawn chain from e7 to b4. And the black knight coming out to the edge of the board. I wonder what the strategies are. It's a bit of an odd kind of piece configuration, I'm going to say, from Alireza. Rarely in this type of structure do you see a double fianchetto from the white bishops. And
we've got some rather interesting pawns already on a5 and d5 without additional central support just yet, although e4 can be played. It's really quite aggressive in terms of space grabbing out of the opening here from white. It's interesting.
Space monster Alireza Firouzja pushing those pawns forward, but with great space comes great responsibility.
I'm sure that's what the quote was.
That's exactly the quote. I believe Spider-Man dropped that line, but yeah, you need to back up pawn pushers by controlling space with your pieces. For now, he's behind in development, needs to get his king castled, needs to develop his queenside knight. And early days here, but down on time already.
And that's the thing, right? This is not that critical moment where you spend 2 minutes. This has been the surprise of the match so far, just Alireza's pace early on in the game. There are options in this position. You know, you could go shock castle, maybe you could push the H-pawn, maybe you could get your queen out and then think about going E4. But whatever you decide, play it fast. This is not the moment you go down by 2 minutes on the clock.
I'm looking at this, and honestly, the only words that are going through my head right now is not again. I'm so afraid for Firouzja here, based on what we have seen so far in this entire grand final match. I don't know how much of this he can afford to do. This is really quite scary now.
Yeah, he plays for France these days, Firouzja. It's déjà vu. Happening again on the clock. He develops his knight given a question mark. I think 99% of humans would have actually castled their king there. But the fact that he did pause for what was a minute and a half refusing to castle shows he's got other plans in mind. A bit of a mysterious one. And look at this. Magnus is the one gaining space this time, kicking away the white knight in order to win a pawn. Magnus is taking in the center. D5 is about to drop.
That's, yeah, a little bit mysterious given that was a minute and a half. Magnus? Like, hang on a second. We're just going, let's grab a two-mover.
This is not a blunder by Firouzja. This is what he wants. He's trying to create an imbalance where he trades off the bishop. Magnus's g5 pawn will become a target. He finds a nice spot for his knight to jump into. The bishop on g2, pinning that black knight on d5. Okay. Yes, I see the evaluation bar. It says it's horrible for black, but for white even. For practically here for Alireza, I think this is the kind of position he's aiming for. I don't think he missed g5.
But a postscript to that, Tanya. When Magnus has 9 minutes to figure out how to get out of this, that's really different to when they have 2 minutes or less. And I'm really worried that Magnus will find a way just because it's so early in the game and he has so much time left.
That's the big point here, right? You flip the script on that clock. Magnus down to 6.5, Alireza at 8.5, and you'd be saying this is great. But look at that. He's still going aggressive. He is going for the attack now, trying to open up the H line. Access denied.
Cool. So what we're saying here is ignore the evaluation bar for now. It's very much a strategic pawn sacrifice to see if we can wrangle something out of the middle game here.
Yeah, I think in the back of his mind, Alireza, maybe even at the front of his mind, he knows that this is not sound. It's what we call a dubious sacrifice. But sometimes in chess, these types of gambits, they do pay off. It's all about the mindset, all about trying to unsettle your opponents. And Magnus, these days, the Magnus iteration of 2025 prefers to sacrifice pawns rather than take pawns. So I do understand his mindset here, Firouzja, but the White King about to castle, he still needs some real action. Not too many pieces can go towards the Black King for now. That's the big issue. And again, the clock just compounding that.
And that's a fantastic move by Magnus, you know, G4, just making sure that no open lines, open diagonals, weaknesses are given, and just keeping everything under control. Not a single pawn trade, which means not a single file allowed for the rook into an attack.
Look at the body language. Look at the facial expression. Look at the clock. I feel like G4 here at the end of this continuation might be what Firouzja missed.
Possible.
Or at least underestimated. Maybe he just assumed he could blow open the king side there, go for the Black King.
Yeah, because if the rook was still on A8, for example, a knight jumping into F4 creates all sorts of fun problems. You can see that with one more tempo, White creates all sorts of issues for Black. But will that ever come?
Because Magnus is one move away from creating issues of his own, right? Knight coming on to C3, the central pawn, he's up one, start moving up the board, kicking out Firouzja's pieces, that knight on C4.
Right.
And it might be Alireza on the defense and down a pawn.
It's coming. The Black Knight forced into the square it wanted to use anyway. It's a very committal decision from Firouzja, but there we go. It's that knight F4 move you mentioned. The knight is coming towards the Black King, maybe threatening a check on H5. Can Magnus deal with that? Is he going to brace for impact somehow? At least creating something for Firouzja. I like this last move, this last idea from him.
I do, and I think the evaluation bar in this position is a little deceptive. From a practical perspective, you're black, your pawn on G4, king out at G7. You know, the white knight about to swoop to H5, jump over, and then the queen coming to that H6 square. It can start feeling scary, but Magnus completely ignores it. He literally doesn't care.
It's really quite worrying. You've played the knight H5 check, and you're going, hang on a second, where are the entry squares for the queen? Could the king even come up to G6 to prevent the queen from coming up? And who wants to play that kind of move in that sort of uncomfortable position? Definitely far from over this, and the eval bar does not tell even a quarter of the story here. The degree of discomfort in the black camp right now is immense.
Yeah, in the meantime, Firouzja continues to think, continues to tank. He needs to get his rooks into the action. Without the rooks, you might not attack. White's bishop is never really joining in, blocked by its own pawn. And Magnus has a total clamp over the dart squares. So strategically, black is just winning. Pawn up and the bind. Firouzja needs to deliver checkmate if he's going to save this game.
What's the wild idea then? Like, are we talking like queen up to D3, king D2 to bring the other rook across? Like, what's the wild, weird anti-positional idea that actually gives us a reasonable chance here?
That's the $250,000 question, right?
Well, yeah.
The 1,000-point question. And right now, the white knight jumping into the center. I still feel Firouzja's king is going to castle on the king side. Maybe he'll push the f-pawn to open up lines for the rook a bit later on. But still takes a while. And in the meantime, Magnus has a few moves. Will he develop black's bishop? At least not clear what Magnus is doing next. He's prevented any pawn pushes, Firouzja. So Magnus reduced to piece play. And not easy to bring out the black queen either.
And I like this move by Alireza because it stops Magnus from getting his knight to the center of the board. Knight d4, not allowed anymore. Knight takes knight would win a pawn. And also, if you trade on Alireza's terms by capturing the knight on d5, I think he intends to capture with the pawn, opening up that E line to eventually get his rook into the game. So Magnus just keeping the tension there, pushes that E pawn forward. And now for Alireza, could he take on c3, double down on that d6 weakness? Because this last move leaves a backward pawn for Magnus Carlsen.
Yeah, it looks really quite committal there because the pawn on d6 is permanently quite weak. But you have to remember, with the material advantage and the fact that Magnus has those knights so cemented, the knight on b5 is still helping to defend that pawn as well. Is it a long-term weakness? Absolutely. But I don't necessarily see how it's going to be targeted effectively.
And Magnus is going to shut the door. He's going to shut the d-file by planting the black knight in the center of the board. So it's going to be very difficult to get at that backward pawn. I agree, long-term weakness. The problem is here, white's knight looks nice, but can be removed by bishop. Black's knight cannot be removed at all, and a shake of the head there from Firouzja. It's going to be very difficult now to break out and get any attack going. The white pieces have been forced into reverse gear.
You mentioned earlier on, David, what, moves 20 to 35 are going to be critical? Well, let's have a quick glance at the clock. Let's check in with what the situation is. It's not as bad as it has been at some points in this match, but 6.5 minutes plays 3. I don't think anyone can realistically argue that's good either.
Especially with no open lines on the board, especially if you're Alireza down a pawn, down a set in this match, you want about 7-8 minutes on the clock. You want to be the one ahead on it right now. Magnus, meanwhile, he's striking at the other pawn. He says, one's not enough, I'm coming for the one on a5 as well.
Yep, Magnus wants to take on a5. In the meantime, Firouzja is hitting the g4 pawn. That's Magnus's only real weakness. If you defend it with a fellow pawn, I think Firouzja's intention is to blow the king side. He needs ways in towards the black king. Pawn to f3 is very likely on the agenda next, but Magnus will be looking to try and deal with that.
Well, h5 would then leave a weakness on that square once trades happen after f3. Will Magnus go on the defense with his queen, or will he capture on a5? And I think if he does that, if you trade the a-pawn for the g-pawn, then it gets really complicated because your king on g7 is suddenly under fire. Firouzja.
Nice. And he does take the a5 pawn, so allowing some counterplay, Magnus Carlsen. I think this is going to be a real exciting moment for Firouzja. At least he needs to just be taking on g4 immediately. Why else would you put your queen on d1? Why is he pausing? Take that pawn off the board. Suddenly white has access to some squares. There we go. It's a one pawn advantage still for Magnus Carlsen, but suddenly you could imagine the black king coming under some fire.
You need to not see ghosts at this point. 2 minutes 30 plays 5 minutes. Firouzja has been exceptional throughout the entirety of the Esports World Cup, but you cannot be consistently playing against the best player in the world so far down on the clock. He recognizes this, of course. He would be a fool not to, but he has to do even more. He has to really dig deep now to try and come out on top.
All right, but we're going to see some forcing moves, so hopefully he will play faster. And look at that. Magnus plays an unexpected move, and Firouzja, ready with his response, comes back with the knight. Bishop takes pawn, hits that rook. Will we see some simplification? Magnus Carlsen would be very happy with that. That knight on d4, far better than Firouzja's bishop on g2. If knight takes bishop, queen takes knight was to happen.
On the bright side, the white queen can at least finally get active. There is one check available for Firouzja. You still need to follow up. It's not going to be easy, but one active piece, then you can evacuate the white rook, get it out the way. This is, again, the best position he's had in a while, but he's just not trusting his instincts. There we go. It is a check. The black king runs. The rook does move. And Magnus still has some work to do. It's all about the black a-pawn, whether that's going to be quick enough to run down the board, or if Firouzja is able to create counterplay in time.
Still up a pawn. I love where he's placed his bishop. Magnus Carlsen has, taking away all the jumping squares from that white knight. Firouzja now threatening a checkmate in one. Watch out, move that rook away or defend it. He moves it to the 7th rank, making sure that h7 also remains protected.
The white bishop is so ineffective. It's just watching the action happen. There we go. It does retreat in the end. He's aiming to reposition it. I'm not sure exactly where. Maybe just on d3 as a defender. But Magnus getting closer and closer with his queenside play.
So many problems to solve. I was even thinking about what would happen if white had to play king h2, with the idea of bringing the bishop up to h3 to, you know, trade a bad piece for a good one. But you can't do that because of knight f3 check. It's so frustrating to try and unbind yourself from this position.
The queen on h6 stuck. The knight on e3 can't move forward. The bishop on f1, hard to imagine an active square here. Yes, you can go up the board, but no diagonals to cover there. The rook on a1 stopping the a-pawn from moving forward. Looks like paralysis for the white pieces in this position. Magnus makes an inaccuracy, but I think you take that, chuck it out of the window. It's just a move, passing the ball to Firouzja, knowing that he's reaching the 1 minute mark.
Yeah, unless we see a massive swing in eval, let's ignore those board annotations for now. That question mark, definitely because Magnus is playing quick moves for now. Good enough moves. We would call them the 80% type of moves where it might not be the best, but it's good enough not to change the eval at all. And he's only going to wait until Firouzja's down to that 30-second mark again before changing the pace. The black rook retreating again, not creating any damage. He's just passing the ball back to Firouzja, and the red appears. It's bullet time.
It's bullet time, and Magnus has an idea. That rook could transfer itself to that left flank behind the a-pawn and start pushing it, which is why Firouzja was forced to bring back the queen, attacking that f6 pawn. Magnus does not repeat this. He's not going to bring his rook back. Whoa, he's sacrificing the f6 pawn.
He knows he can get the queens off the board. Next move, Magnus Carlsen, he's going to swing the black queen across to g7 in front of his own king. He's going to go for the trade. And Firouzja, if the queens disappear, it's all about the black a-pawn. 40 seconds, though. He needs to decide. Queen's off the board or on the board. Just make a move.
But how do you decide? Both are equally bad. Also, you've got no time. Alireza Firouzja frozen with no good options on the board. He jumps in with a knight. Magnus, he can trade. And look at Alireza. It's almost like he's giving up.
Looks so frustrated. I've never seen him look this helpless, Alireza, on the camera. He can give a check with his bishop. He drops his queen and he drops his queen, Alireza Firouzja. It's a simple knight fork to end that game. The writing was on the wall anyway, but Magnus Carlsen takes the win. He's so close now.
A blunder ends game number 3, but not for the first time in this match. 4 minutes versus 1 minute. The clock tells all. Time trouble seems to be reigning supreme in this grand final. Magnus Carlsen is now potentially a game away from winning the grand finals.
Blunders do not appear out of a vacuum in chess. This is a result of Magnus's consistent pressure on the board in every single move, pretty much from the start, with the black pieces, not only of this game, but of the entire match itself. And that head nod by Magnus tells you everything you need to know about how he's feeling, about his chances right now. And a stunning finish here. Alireza Firouzja, lost on the board, eventually makes a one-move blunder, trying to avoid those queen trades, stepping back. But that's not good enough. The knight jumps in, picks the queen. Alireza resigns.
Wow, and it's 2 games in a row, 2 wins in a row for Magnus Carlsen, who actually lost the first game of this set. It is match point, and a draw would seal things for him. With the white pieces, Magnus, he very rarely loses a game. He did lose one to Hikaru, so some inspiration needs to be taken there for Firouzja, but that one, not enough. The nerves are going to be settling for both players. Firouzja has to maintain some hope.
Nerves are going to be jangling for Alireza Firouzja. He needs to win. Magnus Carlsen needs only a draw, and he starts with the white pieces. David, few in the world, if any, can make a comeback from this situation.
It's possible. It's possible. It's not going to be easy, though. Firouzja has to start. Step 1, it's basic. Stay up on time.
The arrow is drawn and Magnus is loading it into the bow. Game number 4. This might be the end of the road for Team Falcons here at chess at the Esports World Cup. Firouzja needs to win on command with the black pieces in order for this set to go to Armageddon. Very possible, but let's see how this pans out.
Magnus Carlsen, whenever he's happy with a draw with white, he opens with his king's pawn. It's just a fact. He knows his openings. It's so difficult to create winning chances with black. He tries the Sicilian Alireza Firouzja. He's met with the Alapin, the C3 Sicilian. This is something Magnus has used on multiple occasions, including in the World Cup final against Prague, when he just needed a draw with white. Firouzja, he needs something special now.
And David, I know that the Alpine Sicilian is also one of your pet openings, something that you've employed so many times. Magnus Carlsen does it every time that he needs to shut down the game. Where do you think, approaching this as blacks, as with the black pieces, will Alireza find his chances? What are the plans that he needs to put into place here?
Yeah, I think steering away from some of the main lines is the key. There are a lot of forcing lines in this opening. That's why Magnus has gone for it. There's a lot of opening theory that leads to sterile equality, where you don't really get out into this game. You don't really maintain any winning chances. Okay, I was going to say, play something offbeat. Pawn to b6, we see the eval bar rise. That is very offbeat. Doesn't fight for the center, but I totally understand the reasoning for it.
I was going to ask you, when you would play the Alpine, was there a move by black that you feared that perhaps Alireza could try?
pawn to d6 is the best move, but in terms of winning with black, I'm not so sure. Equalizing is normally the goal in chess with black, but not enough this time. b6, he just wants to fianchetto his bishop. Magnus might be forced to attack if Firouzja doesn't play in the center. Magnus is going to go on the front foot, but maybe that's not what he wants to do.
And for white, one of the very key ideas is to go d4 in these positions. You want to get that center control, get the bishop out to c4, try attacking the knight as well. But Magnus, he takes a pause, so definitely b6, a surprise.
So, Magnus Carlsen down on the clock. Okay, not by much, but it's so rare in this grand final, we might as well mention it when it happens. Alireza Firouzja, though, not looking just for an equal position. We need to win, remember. Pawn takes pawn in the center of the board. Firouzja looking like he wants to hopefully start building a little bit of clock advantage. Recaptures with the knight. And finally, Firouzja goes down to below 9 minutes. Still very, very early on in this game.
Still just move 6, and both players definitely freestyling. Neither side has studied this one before, we can guarantee that. Knight takes pawn on d4. Normally you want a queen there, but Magnus senses the white knight will be very active. The white queen could jump out early in this scenario, and Firouzja needs to just trust himself. Make moves at this point. The bishop comes out quickly. I like the way he's handled this opening, I've got to say. Alireza, I think he'll get it some chances at some point. The black knight kicked back meanwhile, and the game goes on.
It does go on, and this rivalry goes on. You know, I'm thinking right now of back in 2021 when Magnus Carlsen shocked the world, moved away from the World Championship crown, walked away from it, but said that he would be willing to fight if it was Alireza Firouzja who would challenge him, who would go on to win and then challenge him. That would make Magnus interested in getting back to the World Championship. That's the kind of respect he had. That's the kind of challenge he wanted to relish against the prince, Alireza Firouzja. And we never got that classical World Championship match. But we're getting the matchup here at the biggest global esports stage, at the esports arena. The king versus the prince, but so far, it's been a Magnus Carlsen show.
Do you think maybe that that actually plays on Firouzja's mind as well, knowing that Carlsen has said that about you? It's very difficult not to let that affect you psychologically, going, ooh, this is the match that he said he'd be happy to play. I really need to not disappoint. I need to go in with a bang. I need to really prove myself. And so far, we've seen flashes of that brilliance that does enable him to compete with Carlsen at the highest level. That said, he hasn't been able to consistently show that throughout this grand final, at least not so far.
Yeah, there's two ways you can take compliments from the world's best ever player. You can say, oh, thank you, I'm going to prove you right. Or you feel the pressure, you feel the expectation. And I mean, instinct-wise, we've seen it so many times. Firouzja digs himself out of trouble on the clock. That's because his instincts are just fantastic. And there we see Team Liquid and the fans looking happy right now. But yeah, Firouzja just hasn't been trusting himself. He needs to go for it now. Pawn to h4, not liked by the computer, I should mention. Magnus Carlsen wants to win this one in style. He's trying to punish black for not finishing development, not castling yet. But the white e-pawn, a bit weak. I'm liking Firouzja's chances here if he can strike somehow in the center.
This move just makes me feel like Magnus wants to have fun in this game. There's absolutely no reason for him to go for this. You know, you play the Alpin, it signals that you want to keep things under control. Then you push the H-pawn voluntarily instead of continuing with development and getting your king to safety. Magnus Carlsen is in for a fight, but that is exactly what might give Firouzja his chance.
Yeah, and remember Magnus, when he was close to knocking down Hikaru in the final game of their match, at least the final of the sixth yesterday, he got nervous. He did blunder.
Yep.
It is possible. He's human. So Firouzja cannot kind of give up hope at any point yet.
Very easy to forget sometimes that our champions, our heroes, the GOATs, are human as well. And, you know, at some point, the torch will pass from Magnus Carlsen to the younger generation. He's here to say, yes, it will happen, just not today.
If Alireza wins this game and makes the comeback into the match to force an Armageddon, that would be a huge momentum shift. I'd go on to say that he'd be a favorite in that Armageddon, you know, given his speed skills, especially when you're down to 30 seconds. That is his best hope right now. And I think the way Magnus is playing, pushing his pawns, delaying his development, this is going to be a feisty game.
I'm going to call it. I think this is going to get crazy. I don't know the result, of course. Difficult to make any predictions here, but I feel that Firouzja is going to get some chances in this one. Already some tactics in the air. The most obvious move would be to push a pawn forward, break open the black bishop, but maybe we could investigate a bit further because Alireza Firouzja has what could be a golden opportunity to shock Magnus Carlsen right now. Not only can he open up that bishop, he can do it forcefully and in style. Knight takes pawn. If the white bishop takes back, then the black bishop takes on f3, removing the defender, hitting the white queen, and when the white queen recaptures, when the dust settles, bishop takes bishop, black has won a pawn with a nice pin to boot. If we go back, after knight takes e5, if the white knight recaptures, then black just says, calm, d6, open the diagonal for my bishop, please, and look at the white knights. Look at the black bishop. It's sniping, it's going to regain the material with interest. This is super complicated. White can even give a check at the end of this with his queen. The game goes on, but Firouzja, he has to take risks like this. He has to gamble.
But this is the one moment I'm glad that he's paused and spending time, because this is a critical decision. And it'll all be worth it. All those minutes spent will be worth it if he plays knight takes pawn. That's a huge advantage. You go up a pawn, your bishop becomes a big piece here.
And of course we have the aid of the eval bar here. We have the aid of some very powerful engines, but Alireza Firouzja, he has the aid of his fantastic instincts. He's paused for a reason. Magnus Carlsen will be jumping out of his chair if he sees the move knight takes e5. He's got to play it. He's got to find it.
Has to be played, right? Especially if you spend so much time and energy calculating this out. I feel like it should happen on the board.
But do you think if Magnus has spotted it, he'll give it away? Because he's also the kind of player who just keeps that poker face until his opponent has made his decision. The more Alireza thinks, I think the higher chances that he spots it.
Who's going to spot it? Let's take a look at Alireza's screen, perhaps. It looks like he was about to push his pawn forward to d6. He does miss the opportunity. It was complicated. It was difficult. It was so hard to evaluate, but he could have played that move so much quicker. Now the black king castles. Status quo has been maintained. Magnus is holding this together with a pin.
But here's the thing, right? Because if Alireza did not go for knight takes pawn and wanted to make the move d6, again, you make it in 20 seconds. Right. But if you take your time, then you find that central blow.
Yeah, I don't blame him at all for missing that. I think superhuman almost, that tactic. But what he's played, the fact that it took him over 2 minutes to play d6.
That's the problem.
That's
That's the issue.
So now 7 minutes plays under 4. Unfortunately, familiar territory here in what potentially could be the last game. Remember, if Magnus Carlsen wins this game, he does not only win the set, he wins the match. So Firouzja needs to win, needs to find a way to crack open the position and take this victory from Magnus Carlsen to force an Armageddon.
Well, there was tension at the center of the board, and what Alireza has done is he slides his rook, defends the bishop, and now can go on to win a pawn. That e5 pawn, now that the bishop on b7 is guarded, knight takes e5. Alireza again, and he does it, but he takes it with his own pawn first, doubling up on the e file.
That's very surprising. He could have done the same thing, but in a more forceful way. If black had taken with the knight, white would have been forced into a variation that could have happened anyway. He basically gave Magnus more choice. And although the position's still now level in the balance, black with the bishop pair, Magnus might be breathing a sigh of relief. He has control over the diagonals for now, although still a hard position to handle. I think easier to play for black, I'm going to say, because white's queenside pawns are slightly overextended, are slightly loose. And of course, we've been talking about bishops today. Alireza with that up his sleeve.
In an open game, right? And both bishops on the longest diagonal of the board. And guess what? The knight joining the party as well jumps onto that central d4 square. I wonder if Magnus will do the same. Go knight d5. There are tactics in the air. He might want to trade pieces off. But it looks like that might work in Magnus's favor if you jump with that knight to the d5 square, given the tension along the c-line.
Oh, that's a good way to trade pieces. Get Magnus closer to the draw that he needs.
It's also frustrating that the queen can't just sidestep for Firouzja to c7 because of the ominous presence of white's dark square bishop, effectively meaning the queen stays on the d-line longer, increasing the probability that the queens come off at some point soon. We're trying our best to figure out a way to keep everything on, to keep the tension, to keep the complications, but I think black is struggling to do that here. And again, opportunity to trade queens, and this time it's Magnus that says no, maybe playing on the clock pressure here as it goes to 6 versus 3.
Exactly, Magnus has sped up Again, not for the first time. He's barely spent over 30 seconds for a single move in this game. And look at this, pawn to e6, the first blunder of this game, the first mistake. The white rooks are going to hit the black queen. It could be over now. The black queen has no good squares. Wherever you go, there's a double attack or a fork. Magnus now looking at the fans, smiling. He knows he's close. He knows he's about to get it. Team Liquid on the edges of their seats.
He knows this is over. The knight about to jump in with a big fork in the position, going material up. Firouzja will fight. He will try to play this on, but I'm not even sure for how long. This is completely busted for black. Magnus Carlsen vibing there.
There we go, knight for rook. Magnus has extra material. He's the exchange up. He's getting close now. The white rooks are coming in. The white c-pawn sprinting forward. Firouzja has minimal counterplay. The white queen holds everything. Is this the final few moves of the Esports World Cup 2025? The black bishop trying to stem the tide, but it's desperate now.
Desperation on Firouzja. Magnus there, he wants to put the finishing touches as quickly as possible, but the whole show, the whole match by Magnus has been dominant so far.
This is absolutely incredible. Alireza Firouzja in a must-win situation. Magnus Carlsen had no business being this aggressive, gunning for this victory, but he only knows one mode. He truly has the heart of a champion, and he is displaying that here, saying, yes, I get that a draw is good enough, but here, watch what I can do.
Well, here at the Esports World Cup, he knows only one mode. That is that when liquid flows, it drowns everything.
Absolutely incredible stuff. Imperious from Magnus Carlsen, but it's not over yet. 5v2, material advantage. All the chips are stacked in his favor. Blunders can still happen. It is never over until it's over. He has to earn that full point.
Everything is earned here. Magnus Carlsen looking up. He's in calculation mode, trying to figure out if he can force it here and now. But there must be a little bit of a ghost in his mind. There was a blunder in game one of this second set when he had a winning position, up on time, up on the board. So Magnus, that's why he's double checking everything. That's why he's slowed down slightly. The longer this game goes on, the more hope for Firouzja. It's just a challenge, staying alive.
Remember, you make your own luck. You need to try and find a way to tempt Magnus into that mistake. Those mistakes do happen, but Firouzja needs to make it happen on command. Queen's off the board, and victory looking that much more remote.
And Magnus needs only a draw to win the match. He doesn't even need to win this game. He's completely winning.
And look at this, the c-pawn now forcing its way through. We're going to see the final move of the tournament.
Magnus Carlsen takes the victory. He wins game, set, and match against Team Falcons. Alireza Firouzja, Team Liquid will take home the 1,000 points for chess at the Esports World Cup. The GOAT reigns supreme, world #1, and now your Esports World Cup champion, Magnus Carlsen.
Incredible stuff. What a performance by Magnus in the semi-finals, taking down Hikaru Nakamura in an epic battle. Comes in today, completely steals the show. You know, they say chess is a simple game. Two players play, Magnus Carlsen wins. This was absolute domination, and Team Liquid rises to the top, and the king stays on the top.
Fans on their feet, incredible scenes in that arena. Quick action replay here of the final few moves, but ultimately Magnus had done the hard work. He won the exchange, he was already up in the match, he forced the queens off, later managed to push his pawn, and game over. Firouzja, unfortunately, helpless.
Incredible stuff. I mean, start from finish, right? You think about set one, just everything he did, how he converted this, needing only a draw in this position. But you know what? He's just too good. He wins, goes on to win this game, a 3-1 victory in set two. What a performance. Just brilliant stuff by Magnus, taking down the world #2. And finally, the firebrand, Alireza Firouzja.
Yep, incredible scenes. Magnus looking fantastically happy as well in those graphics. There we see him with a smile as the final key is given to him. It's about to fall prey to the world #1.
There we go. The Keymaster hands the winning key to put into the trophy, which now belongs to world #1 and now Esports World Cup champion. An absolutely incredible achievement for Magnus Carlsen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the best player the world has ever seen. Team Liquid's Magnus Carlsen!
Magnus, you have once again shown why you are still the best chess player in the world.